Selectboard, Monday, July 10th, 2017. We've just had a site visit, State Park Road, related to trails. And the first thing on the agenda here is redecking the town beach docks. And I looked to Nicole or Bill to kind of provide recommendations on what you think needs to be done, what the problem is.
Well, I brought some samples. We had the beach was, when the docks were put in by Steve, SJW Docks, he said that the boards were starting to rot, and so we needed to really think about replacing them, especially the amount of activity we get on the dock. And so I looked into some different options, mainly just had some quotes in here of just cedar docking, so if we were to replace the planks with what we have already, which is wood, and also this new type of synthetic decking called Nilo deck panels, and so they're basically made from carpet fibers. Ben, the sales person, couldn't make it today, but he just basically explained that it lasts longer. I also put some of the pros and cons of it in the packet I gave you, so you can kind of see how much how it lasts compared to wood, and just some of the pros. It doesn't get hot. There's another decking called Trex that does get really hot on the feet, so it's both Steve and the dock doctor company just said that it's probably not a good idea to use that because a lot of people use their bare feet on the docks. So just wanted to touch base. I talked to Bill, and I talked about just what we kind of do from here, and he, I think agrees too that we do need to do something eventually with the boards, because I don't want anyone to put a foot through, so.
To do it this season?
I met with Rich Ahrens, who's a builder and also on the commission, and we met down there this morning and looked at the boards, and they are, they need replacing with the amount of use that dock gets with 50 or 60 people on there on a weekend. On a sunny day, it'll last this season. It will make it this season, but it is starting to splinter, and the underneath of it is actually rotting out because, of course, that's where it gets all the water bumping up onto it, is rotting out more than you can sort of see if you were on top of it. It sort of looks okay at the moment, but it is rotting out from underneath. It's about... We lost, I think, most of the dock during Irene, so that's about how old it is. I also talked to Steve Williams from SJW, and there are the pros and cons of the materials anyway. He recommends cedar, and we stay with cedar, only because the price is triple, maybe even quadruple for the synthetic. It tends to warp in the heat, and the panels are removable. So if they do get washed away, they can get washed away, they just sort of pop out.
The synthetic or the cedar?
Both. They slip in and out. They're removable because that's what we have to do when we get a storm or something. The panels have to be removed. And hopefully Steve gets to it before the storm. Sometimes it's after the storm. So, that's...
If you were to do it in the next 2 or 3 weeks, how long will those docks be out of commission?
They do not need to take the old panels out. They can leave the dock where it is, build the new panels, and then swap them out. There's no downtime.
Okay. And the floating dock?
It's okay. It's actually going in this week. Steve said it's going in this week. It's not there now because of the high water, I guess.
So why don't you've got a couple of quotes here. You want to just tell us what you've got here? Make sure we're all looking at the same thing.
Yep, so the first one is the Nilo panel, so it's the synthetic.
Yep.
They said at the bottom it says 8,000. but I just added some of the estimated installations that they didn't add right away. So we're looking at about $9,400, and that's for the synthetic paneling. And then I have the cedar planks, which is the following page, which I also added the costs that they don't list directly in there, which would be $3,800. And then I got a quote from
Which
Steve.
is what, the labor? What is that?
So the extra one is just the estimated delivery installation, because on the first page, they just explained the materials, and then you have to add in the installation. That's why they just give you kind of an estimate of how much it'll be to deliver it and install it. And then Steve Williams gave another quote for the cedar deck panels. And I also got a quote from a contractor as well, but I didn't add that one just because he couldn't give me an exact quote until if I was really interested in proceeding with the cedar docks by him.
So to your point, then, the synthetic nylon deck is more than twice
More than.
More than twice.
cedar, and
Yeah, the materials are 8,400 for that or thereabouts, and the ones for the cedar are 2,700.
Right.
and budget-wise, if we were going to pursue this,
We don't have that amount of money in the beach fund at all.
Right.
Recreation Capital Bank, it says 3,136. Is that from you, Mary? Huh?
1,200 of it is for disc golf.
Of that 3,000?
Mhm.
And then you talk about the repair and improvement fund for the town, 32,000, of which we have notionally planned a rug and risers for the town hall, library, fire station, septic tank.
We all get that.
You have what out of there?
Yeah, I don't-
So there's an attachment, it was in my box, you guys all have it?
Nope.
I know.
It was in the box today.
What's the problem, right?
Says docs, docs, handwriting. It's page 26 of 82. Says recreation capital. Wonder what mysterious person left it. That's from you? Laurie?
Hi,
Hi, we're gonna be a few minutes. I'll just, you can hear and listen, and we'll get to, trails probably in about 15 minutes. Mute on your side, then we don't hear the background. Thanks. Was this from you, Dean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Improvement and repair reserve fund, is that the second page?
Yes, and those are what's planned,
So that's for the whole town? it's not
Yes.
just the rec budget.
yeah. So what's the board think? So you're kind of said that you could make it through this year, this season, or give us a recommendation.
We're starting to tread on thin treads, let's put it that way. I think we will make it through this season, yes. And I think you would have a hard time having a contractor tell you you will make it through this season. But it
What did
looked,
Rich say? What did Rich Aaron say?
Rich says they need to be replaced. Will
Especially
not
for
give, pardon?
Liability, safety.
Right.
Yes.
If you have punky
Yes,
wood on a
yes.
dock.
Right.
Well, here, I mean, what we're looking at for a future here is like trying to maintain our facilities to a degree whereby we are not just minimizing liability, we also want to maximize enjoyment. And there are several areas of recreation now which are starting to look a little bit run down. The dock is one of them. It's also, just so that you know, it's not a commercial dock, it's a residential dock. So structurally, it is a 2-inch diameter frame rather than a 2.5-inch. So, you know, and given the use that it gets and the increasing use, it's not going to get any less over time. but we might want to think about replacing the dock.
And the
We're gonna
budget,
start an auction for it and use that money to bump up to a commercial grade dock.
right, and we usually put the docks in May, so, and the budget will flip in that July, so that's the weird waiting period too, is that if, we would have to think about doing it this fiscal year.
We're in the fiscal
because-
year right now.
Yeah, the
Right.
one we're in now.
Straddling.
So what would the board like to do?
Is there a lead time difference on how fast the dock doctors could do the cedar versus the Nilo deck and get them completed if we wanted it as soon as possible?
Well, the one thing that they said with the Nilo deck is that they will run out of the decking this season. So if we don't do it this season, there won't be Nilo deck here. Because the investor that they had here, they didn't have somebody to reinvest, so the amount that they have right now is
I
gonna
saw
be
that.
done.
They bought out their inventory
Yeah.
and that'll be it. But do you know how long it would take for them to do this?
I'm not sure. I'd have to figure it out, but
Steve Williams, just from a timing perspective, would get on it within, now.
yeah.
And he's,
He's not the low bidder, though.
Well, he's giving it to I mean, he's been working with us for a while and.
I think if you look at the total of the dock doctor's cedar bid,
Yep.
and the total of Steve's bid, Steve is,
3,800 versus 4,250.
3,800 doesn't include everything.
right, if you
Right.
look, you have 3,800 plus materials. So I think you have to add the 2,700 in there.
no, I think
It's in
that's
there.
in, but the 200 disposal is not,
Okay.
it looks like. So 4,000 versus 42, 48.
Is Steve a sole source vendor also? Is he on your vendor list, your preferred vendor list?
Bet he is.
I think it is.
I wouldn't be comfortable picking the nylon stuff just because we don't have any other price information. It's
Or
really
replacement.
expensive.
If a couple boards break or have no
I
inventory.
mean, I'm sure there's other products out there, so, but cedar, I mean, the prices are, for the material and stuff, that's a pretty common product.
Dean, is Steve Williams on the docks, is he,
Sorry.
Steve Williams is a preferred vendor in our list?
He's a preferred vendor for the wastewater system operations on Thompson's Point.
What about the docks at the beach?
Take a look.
Says installation no more repair of docks, boats at Town Beach.
Okay.
Nice.
So I'll make a motion to approve the estimate to purchase 6-foot cedar deck replacement panels for the Shawat Town Beach, not to exceed $4,248, and to be completed and installed as soon as possible.
Is that seconded? Seconded. Any comments from anybody?
Where, in terms of budgeting, where would we be taking this money from?
So, we keep losing Dean.
It looks
Dean, where are you?
it looks like,
You say as soon as possible, but we want to put a date on it. Say as soon as, that's kind of a completed by such and such a date.
Well, here,
you did, yeah, I hear you. Anyone have a-
hey, Dean.
I don't know
Some more
what his
questions
schedule
for you.
is, and there's no estimate of when he can do it.
So we have a motion, now the question is, how do we pay for it? So you added the assets we have in the capital recreation fund. Is that what you
Right.
were thinking in your recommendation to us?
Well, I said that's what's available. Mary seemed to say there's some that's reserved for disc golf, or it's,
We specifically set aside $1,200 last year in the budget and specifically said it's for disc golf. And we just ordered the disc golf baskets, which will take up the $1,200 that's sitting there, plus another $600 that's also in the Recreation Capital Fund. $1,800 is gonna come out of the Recreation Capital Fund, already done,
That's the Recreation Capital Fund.
yes.
Right. So that
We're
leaves-
looking at
You
an
have funds in
improvement.
the repair and maintenance
Right.
fund that you consistently, the money is there, and there's like, well, we're gonna use it for this project, we're gonna use it for that project, but the bottom line is there's, seems to be quite a bit of lag time between actually earmarking the money for a project and then actually doing the project, like the carpets, for example. So, if you go ahead and spend the $4,500 out of the repair and maintenance account, we're coming into the next budgeting season, and you probably have enough time between now and next year, depending on what all these things are that you've earmarked, you won't run out of funding. So you should take it.
So what we know is available just on the second page of our summary is 12,000 that's notionally available based on a budget for the rug and a budget for the risers. So it's available. Okay,
So friendly amendment to come out of the improvement repair fund?
any other questions from anybody? Ready for the vote? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
We'll get together with Steve as soon as we can and get on it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Tell them we said by the end of July.
The next item, any adjustments to the agenda?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Public comment for something that's not in the agenda? Yes.
I have a comment about the town green. Even after all the rain we had, it was not a mud hole. And I think that's a really good thing. Our engineering worked. Good, good.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great to hear. Any other public comment? Select board updates? You usually give us an update, Fritz, on the status of the pumper project. And-
Actually, there's still been beating up the selected contractor a little bit. And they were thinking about signing a contract. We found a few more errors in the go-around because it's thick, so probably the end of this week.
That you would make a commitment?
Commitment to the contractor, and then we kind of,
Speak up, please.
we're kind of stumbling or fumbling along with that because you get a 10,000 some dollar discount if you pay for it up front.
Which we were thinking of
Which
doing.
we're thinking of doing, but the bonding funds won't be available till
August 2nd.
August 2nd. But they have a price increase in July 31st. So we're just kind of riding that fence to keep this year's price, but the funding for the, 100% funding for the discount,
Hopefully that works.
if that, if that's a good description or not, but it was just
Get
kind
both.
of,
Okay. Any other updates from anybody? Okay, why don't we get into we have 1 hour set aside in our agenda for the bicycle pedestrian program grant application for the State Park Road, along State Park Road. So I would like to set some ground rules so we all get to have a say. By the way, part of the ground rules, do I need the egg timer? And that is, how many people want to speak about the trails? I mean, does everybody here want to speak, or just a few people? Okay, so maybe 10 people would like to speak.
It depends on what you say.
Understand?
I essentially would like to say
So,
And not everybody's here because it starts at 7:50.
so one of our objective would be to have a discussion, and if we're in a position, have a motion regarding proceeding toward a grant, and then there would be a vote at the end of this discussion. So that's sort of the layout. One of my questions is, for our board members, do you want to say anything in advance, or you want to hear public comments first?
Maybe bring everyone up to speed on the site visit, and then open it up to community discussion.
Okay. We just had a site visit.
So we still have people coming in, and it doesn't start until 7:15, so
Okay.
we should be
Yep.
mindful of that.
Cost estimates. So
Okay, well, we're stalling for a minute as we, Official start time is 1:15. We can do 6 minutes. The Summit Road name for we could go to the 8:15 item, that'll take 5 minutes. The 8:15 item, we have a requirement to apply a name to the road that goes up Mount Philo State Park. Needs a name for telecommunications, fire and rescue. There's been a suggestion that name of that road be called Summit Road. Because right now we have State Park Road, which goes to Mount Philo. So Summit Road is sort of unique, and it would satisfy the need for a unique name for that. People want to make a motion for that? Comment about that?
Well, I always thought it was State Park Road to the top. It's
I
not.
believe it stops at the intersection of Mount Philo Road, State Park Road.
Could it continue to the end?
Well, I think the objective is to have a unique designation. It's in state land.
Yeah. The comment from Fire and Rescue is that they would prefer a different name because there are certain protocols, with it being a state park, they would contact the state. If it's an event, it could be search and rescue versus at State Park Road. It's more apt to be a residential issue, so they would prefer a different name.
You might get from a dispatcher who's not familiar with the area, may not be able to tell you distinctly where it is. So, if someone was off the edge of State Park Road, it would be different if you're responding to the park or if you're driving down the road. So I think it's a good idea to give it a special name.
Motion from someone?
Sure, I'll make a motion to approve Summit Road as the name for the access road to Mount Philo State Park,
Up Mount Philo State Park, or
Yes.
up
to the summit of Mount
to
Philo
the
State
summit.
Park.
Is that seconded?
I'll second it.
Any discussion on that name? Is Fire and Rescue happy with that?
I did have a question. How will it be delineated where the down road is different from the up road?
With that language.
There's a split.
Having
Summit Road becomes.
Having heard that one on the radio, it's usually the down road or the up road,
Got it.
because they're marked one way. so.
They are, right. Okay.
Any other comments? Yes, Clark?
I definitely approve of it being a different name. One of the things that's sad up there is that the person that donated the land to the state of Vermont to be the first park doesn't really have any recognition and association with the park or the entrance. So I don't have a problem with Summit, but the woman who gave the land was named Frances Humphreys, and she donated she bought that up over a period of years anonymously, just like Rockefeller's bought Webb's bought Shelburne Point. So it was a spectacular thing that she did for all of us. And this may not be the way to recognize that, but at some point we should.
Oh, it's Frances Humphrey. You said, what was her name?
Humphreys.
Or his? I'm sorry.
Frances Humphreys.
If we were to use that name, would that need an approval from the family? Is she still, what year did this happen?
85, 90 years ago.
Okay, so
She was born 2 centuries ago.
Okay. Do we have to get some permissions to do that if we were?
It could be, and like I say, that's just a comment. I just, when we did the park, and we named the trails, they were gonna be Rabbit Trail and this trail and that trail, but then we decided to name them after the families, Barney Trail, Roberts Trail, the families who had farmed there for generations, Byington Trail. Which it was a nice thing to do, and it's a nice way to do it. I don't expect you to, Summit's fine, I don't expect you to visit long about it, but if you have time to consider it further, consideration.
And Dean, how did this start? The fire department came to us?
No, the park wants to be served by Champlain Valley Telecom for either DSL or fiber, I'm not sure which, but in order to have that service, they need an address.
So we have a motion.
They currently publish a Mount File address for all of their payments and all of that when they're sending text to people, so.
Yeah, they need an address for the structures, especially the ones on the top.
Any change in the motion?
Humphreys is good with me.
I thought Summit was kind of,
Well, we have a motion.
Regular.
We want to amend the motion,
I
or?
think it should. Well,
Can we change it to Humphreys? I changed my amendment to
Your
Humphreys.
motion is it Francis Humphreys or Humphreys Road?
Francis Humphrey Road.
That's too
Humphrey
long.
Road.
Humphreys Road.
Okay, so your
Or
motion is
Francis Road, Francis is good. No.
Change the name to Humphreys Road.
Humphreys Road.
Do you know how it's spelled?
No, but Clark will tell us how to spell it later. Yes.
What if it was called Humphrey Summit?
So Fritz, where are you with amending your motion?
Humphreys. Humphreys Road.
Has that been seconded?
Sure.
Okay, any other comments with the name that we've come up with? John?
I'm sorry, I didn't realize we were on this topic. The suggestion of giving it a name that is descriptive probably came from us at Fire and Rescue, where we have Mount Philo Road, State Park Road, and the interest is to have something descriptive that when we hear it in an emergency call, we know it's going to be a response in the park rather than someplace else. I suppose everyone will eventually learn Humphreys, but when we respond to the park, it's a very, very different response. So we were looking for a trigger word, like mountain access or park access or something, so that when we hear it toned out, we know that it's going to be a mountain or park response. So that was the rationale behind the use of the word summit or mountain access or something like that.
Mountain Access
So we
Road,
have a motion?
Mountain Access Road.
I don't care.
This was only supposed to take 5 minutes.
Yeah, we better hurry. Better figure it
We're
out.
running late. So what's your final?
Right now, it's at Humphreys Road.
Okay, that's seconded?
Yeah, it was seconded.
Seconded?
right.
Okay. All in favor of the motion to name the Summit Road, Humphreys Road? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Okay, we're on schedule.
Perfect.
We had a site visit at 5:30 on State Park Road. We're here tonight to consider a motion to proceed for a grant following the scoping study we did under the leadership of the Trails Committee. So we had a site visit for 1 hour looking at the primary recommendation to date prior to this meeting has been a trail on the north side of State Park Road. And then there's some variations, there's some adjustments, there's some easements in there. So we don't have to stay exactly at the edge of the road. Some places we do, Clark apparently gave us an easement years ago, I don't know how many. There's a 100-foot swath of land on the north side of which we have an easement. We can use 8 feet of that for trails for a good section of that. Another section, we'd be pretty close to the road, maybe 4 to 8 feet off of the road. So we looked at that, we looked at the trees. There are probably 6 to 10 oaks, maples, willows, enormous willow in that path. And we'll discuss tonight some workarounds versus just cutting down of see what the options are. So that's what we did. We're back here now, looking for discussion, and I've asked the board, is it okay to have the audience speak first, and then we will have our comments? So I think we have probably a dozen or so, and as Heather mentioned, as the discussion gets going, we'll have more comments. I'd like to leave the comments to 2 or 3 minutes. I have an egg timer if we need to use it. Got a gavel if we have to use that. Please recognize the chair. Let's not have talking among each other. Let's recognize the chairs, and I'll let you know who can speak. And this way we'll have some order, and we'll try to have a good meeting, good discussion. It's great to have so many people here. Hopefully we can come up with a recommendation. So, who would like to speak? Does Trails want to say anything at this time that hasn't been said that are? And Lori's on the phone. The co-chair is Lori Thompson and Margaret Russell are the co-chairs of the Trails Committee, have worked hundreds of hours on this over the last couple of years, just finished a $50,000 scoping study, and the opportunity for a grant is within the next couple of weeks, and that's why there's some motivation to make some kind of a decision tonight.
I'm Margaret Russell, I'm co-chair of the Trails Committee. We are coming before the Select Board to ask them for a letter of support for a VTrans grant. That's fairly standard procedure that, we've already had one letter of support from the regional planner. This project could be a standalone project from Mount Philo to Greenbush Road. If we get this done, the underpass is already partially done. That will be 2.5 miles of continuous trail off the road that will be usable for the people of Charlotte. We would be using, it's a very large VTrans grant. Using VTrans money inflates all the costs. It just does. It becomes a little bit more complicated of a project. We chose VTrans because they have the most funding available. And so the costs to the town are actually the lowest to go through VTrans. It's a 20% match. We have the $40,000 that was approved. We have another 10 to 15 in our Trails Committee. And then Fritz has generously offered to do an in-kind donation to make up the rest. So we are not asking for more funding to complete this section of trail. The underpass is already connected to the Melissa and Trevor Mack Trail. We don't want path, end of path. We want to finish this part so that we can, then work on the likely smaller path from co-housing to the village. Is there anything I haven't? Thank you.
Talking a little bit more about that we're asking for a letter of support, and the fact is that the grant that we would be requesting, we don't know if it will be approved, but we want to get the request in and have this request done. And Lucy maybe can speak a little more to this, that there can be some tweaking when the engineering is done. There are a lot of things that still need to be done. It's not like we don't have a path already totally set in stone.
And we'll also be very lucky to get this grant on our first try. We hope we do, but just because we do the grant, it's a very competitive grant cycle, according to Lucy, who's also working on other grant proposals through VTrans. If we try a second time, the possibility goes up. So we want to apply this year. I think it's due in 4 days. Yeah.
So when you speak, please state your name, and I'm not sure I said Lucy is here from Du Bois King, who oversaw the scoping study. The particular application that we're looking at for this segment, the price is $529,000 and it's to a VTrans standard. Handicap accessible is a requirement when you get state and federal money. Our portion is 105, of which in our budget at town meeting, we approved a $40,000 standalone article in the town meeting. We have $15,000 in the trails budget. That adds up to $55,000. And with the donation of project oversight that Fritz has done, we can manage this particular opportunity within the money that's available now. Comments, questions? Yes, please identify yourself.
Yes, Sean Coyle. I downloaded the VTrans Bicycle and Pedestrian Program Guidelines and Application. And I looked through it. The word grant does not appear. Second thing that comes out of that, reading it, was that in-kind donations have to be approved by VTrans, and it says only applies to VTrans approved operations of eligible services and materials towards a project. Local officials spending time on the project can be reimbursed for their time, but it is not considered in kind. The other thing that struck me was this is a reimbursement program. We have to pay for everything first and then get reimbursed on it.
Is that true?
Anybody want to comment to that, or?
Talk about it.
As far as the in-kind goes, we did talk with John Kaplan, who's the program coordinator, and if the,
Coordinator
for this,
VTrans?
for the bicycle pedestrian program
And that's
in VTrans.
Thank you.
And he said that the in-kind match is allowed if the service is provided as a donation. So if someone voluntarily serves in a capacity that's required, that's a donation, and that's allowed to be treated as an in-kind match. That's what he said.
I would only add that would it not be a conflict of interest for a select board member to donate their time for this?
I'm not sure I understand what the conflict would be.
Well, these select board members are to watch out for our funds, and you're putting someone in a very impossible position if they're donating in-kind services to this sort of thing.
I hear your comment. Clark, you had your hand up next.
I'm going to go to the other end of this, which is the kind of the history and the genesis, and just to make sure everybody in the room kind of knows how we got here. I have not worked on this grant or the details of this grant. The original underpass, we got funded. I at the time owned farmland on both sides of Route 7. And we wanted to get an underpass to get to the Little League field. But we couldn't get one under enhancement funds, but because the farm owned land on both sides of the road, they could build a tunnel to help the safety of the farm and also the safety of the vehicles going up and down Route 7 by having the farm tractors be able to go under the road. A, and B, they took out a tunnel under Route 7 at the old Claflin farm that went between where John Snow lives, which was the eastern Claflin farm, to the western Claflin farm, which is the Claflin farm development. So that place to run cattle under Route 7 was taken out, and the tunnel's being built. Then the town did the Trevor and Melissa Mack Trail, which went across what used to be my property and on up to State Park Road. And then when I sold my land on State Park Road, we did the easement heading east toward the state park, but it only goes to the top of the hill, the top of that rise before you make the last descent. And I'm not up on all these standards, and my guess is that our easement may be problematic, but what we were trying to do by donating a 100-foot easement, of which 8 feet could be the trail, was provide the opportunity to go behind the pretty trees that overarch the road and not disturb them. And also thinking that putting a shoulder down the road through where there's a 10 or 12 or maybe more foot drop off to the brook the wetlands was just gonna be a, you know, kind of like building Route 7 up State Park Road. So we donated the easement and made it wide so that we could get through the wetlands and up the hill to the other side, where we thought, well, when you get to the hill the other side, you have sight distance, you can actually see the park from that point. And it would be nice to get a little bit more of an easement from that property, but if it doesn't happen, there's the town right-of-way and the ability to go beside the road. The Trails Visions map that was developed at the end of the last century, you know, identified key spots in town to try to connect. And when there would be a development or land use activities going on, the town would try to get the appropriate easement. We spent 25 years, we spent a generation in this town trying to get adequate Little League fields before the fields at the Berry Farm were constructed. And the idea of the tunnel was that kids from either side of town, adults, everybody, but kids particularly, could come and go from those resources, Mount Philo State Park and the Little League field, without fear of getting run over on Route 7. So, you know, this is the kind of Greenbush Road through the underpass, by the Little League field, and to the state park. It is kind of a very, very important east-west corridor. My involvement has been historic, not present. I just want to thank the Trails Committee and the Select Board. I want to thank Fritz. And I also appreciate the range of opinions in this room, but I just thank you for letting me take a moment and just tell you how we got here over the last 50 or 20 years. And I'm hopeful and excited that we'll, in our generation, get this done.
Thank you. Other comments? Yes. State your name, please.
Yes, Brian Mechanic. I have a question or two to ask of you folks. One, the $40,000 referendum item on the voting there this spring, how was that identified? For what purpose was that to be used? What was the identification? Was it called a nature trail, or how was that?
Oh, I could read it to you.
It was supposed to be added to the Trails Reserve Fund.
It's to leverage monies toward,
I'm just curious as to the nomenclature, the way it was identified.
what page is it?
It's on page 9 in the town report.
Page 9. Was Article
6.
6, page 9. Will the town approve raising $40,000 by taxes in addition to those monies raised pursuant to Article 5, which was the budget, to be allocated to the Trails Reserve Fund, which approval shall not become effective until further approved by the Australian ballot, which is what that was done as well, in accordance with our charter requirements. So to answer your question, for the Trails Reserve Fund.
Second question, is the amount that is in the grant plus Mr. Tiga's generous fund offer and the existing amount in the town coffers now, is that going to cover the entirety of the 2.5 mile stretch, or is this segmental, and where's the money going to come from for the next segment, if that's the case?
This discussion is a piece, a complete piece for the trails, and it goes from, as we said, State Park to the Trevor Mack Trail. By doing that connection, you then have a trail from Mount Philo, co-housing Greenbush Road. So it's a standalone segment.
The last thing, the statement. It seems a little ironic that we're talking about a path in the proximity of Mount Philo State Park for bicyclists and pedestrians, when Mount Philo State Park has a road that is not heavily traveled by vehicles, but could be and is used for a path for pedestrians and bicycles. Now, granted, it's an ascent and descent, so it's a little more arduous. But it just seems that if you're, and I know why you're doing this, but if you wanted something as a somewhat unique pathway, perhaps a consideration elsewhere rather than the duplicity in proximity to Mount Philo.
I don't know if you want to make,
I'll just put the, you know, the long-term vision is to be able to go from Mount
Oh, I
Philo
understand.
to the town to the beach. So we're just working on a portion, a standalone portion right now.
What is, to Brian's question, the distance of this trail section?
About half a mile, a little over.
yes, Mary?
I'm Mary Denfleck, and I want to speak as a member of the Conservation Commission, that we basically feel that this is, the Trails Committee has done a good job of studying this and looking at all the options, and that we are okay with it going forward, however, along the State Park Road. And I also want to thank Clark for his historical perspective. I think it's all the more important that we finish that section so the children can go back and forth to Ballview, especially.
Yes, please identify yourself.
My name is Ohanya, Franz Ohanya, and I want to make a comment about the ecological implications of this construction project. 20 years ago, when you started thinking about this, it made some sense, perhaps, to pursue this project. But today, we have big ecological problems in front of us, and when we do a construction project, we are really obligated to consider what the ecological implications are, and in particular, what is the carbon footprint of the project we are about to undertake. Nobody on this Trails Committee, nobody on the Select Board has considered that question. So let me tell you what the ecological impact of this project is in terms of carbon footprint. I estimate it to be about 2 million pounds of carbon dioxide for the construction of the trail. If you throw in also the construction of the tunnel, it might be easily 4 million pounds of carbon dioxide. This is roughly equivalent to driving 2 million miles in a car. Should we inflict harm equivalent to driving 2 million miles in a car on the environment for the sake of the little advantages that people have talked about in having this trail project come to fruition? That's what I'd like you to consider.
How do you define the carbon footprint that's so high?
Carbon footprint is defined by pounds of carbon dioxide emitted during the construction.
What was your assumption? I mean,
There are general rules for calculating carbon emissions for different kinds of projects, and for a rough estimate, it is possible to estimate the carbon footprint simply from the cost of the project in dollars. For construction projects, the carbon dioxide cost is generally more than 1 pound of carbon dioxide per dollar expended. I have here a reference, if you're interested in examining this, which gives calculations of the sort. These are rough calculations, but a physicist would call order of magnitude calculations. I might be wrong by a factor of 2 one way, I might be wrong by a factor of 2 the other way, but that's the ballpark of the carbon dioxide cost of this project.
Michael?
Mike Russell, I'm not a physicist, but 2 million vehicle miles is the lifetime of 10 vehicles. And I think that if that's the cost in carbon footprint for a pedestrian trail, that's gonna, I mean, I think you have to factor in the savings in carbon for the miles and feet walked that are not in the carbon producing transportation modes. So I don't know how you calculate that, but my guess is you come out ahead.
Yeah, I just find it such a high number. I mean, we're talking about compressed gravel, a couple of feet, 8 feet wide, half-mile long. Seems like a big number that you've come up with, but I'm not a physicist. What was that?
The cost of that trail is $1.5 million.
No. The actual construction cost is $342,000.
I think he's adding all 3 sections from the scoping study. There were 3 sections. We're only looking at construction of the first section that the scoping study looked at. But if you added up the 3 estimates for the scoping study that Du Bois and King completed, it is closer.
I'm not sure the construction is that much too, that included.
Yeah, the actual.
Engineering and
Right.
other costs too.
Oh, I see
I
what
think
you're
it's
saying.
less than 2.5 million.
It's 1 8-foot path. The construction cost is $342,000. It's not a couple of $1 million.
Well, for the State Park Road section, but the scoping study included the section from co-housing to the.
Which isn't on the table right now.
Well, it's in the scoping study.
Oh, I thought
It's not part of the grant application, but the scoping study included it.
Right, we had studied it all.
The whole, okay, and you only focused on this one.
We've been focusing
For
on
this
this one for the
grant.
application.
And people have been asking what the total, the whole project would be. And you have that now, because we didn't have that answer. You have that now?
See if I can,
So part of that total cost depends on whether we use V-Trans funding or
right.
not.
I mean, that was a big variable, and it's much less than 2.5 million. So,
We can't hear back here. You say 2.5 million?
well, I think that was the number that he used, and it's much, much less than that. I think that the upper limit of all of the new trail going from the state park to the village was about $1 million. And it would be less than that if we narrowed the width of the northern section, which is something we're considering to reduce the impacts. But for the part along State Park Road, it'll be 8 foot wide, and that's to meet the V-Trans standards, so.
Yes.
Cheryl Clay, can people in the front stand up? It's very hard to hear.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Yes.
Greg Renalo. The P, does that mean there's a parking lot going in there next to Mount Philo State Park on the northwest corner?
Not that it's going in there, it's approximately, it's meant to be the parking at the state park.
At the state park, which is already packed?
Which is already there.
Cars are going down the road? And then, because I live on Mount Philo Road, and if this trail is built, I'd like to park and then walk my dogs. But, because I'm afraid to walk down Mount Philo Road because it's death-defying. And then, so I'm just wondering, but there's no place to park at Mount Philo now. So I'm just wondering if there would be additional parking or how you deal with that. At least all summer there isn't, if you go on a nice crispy day in January.
So we're only dealing with State Park Road,
Right.
not Mount Philo.
But there's a P there for parking for the trail. I'm just wondering where that parking would be if you wanted to use the trail.
There's
No parking.
No parking is proposed.
You want to answer that, Margaret, about?
So we know that parking is an issue. I'm sorry, we know that parking is an issue at Philo. Lori, my co-chair, has been meeting with the committee at Philo. It's a big issue for them, and they are engineering it and looking at it and trying to come up with some options. So we don't have a solution yet, but there are committees looking at a solution for the parking problem on the state park at Philo. We do have small areas of parking for this trail along the way. There's some at co-housing. There's people who park at the Little League fields. There used to be 2 places on Lower Town Trail. There's parking at the flea market, there's parking at downtown, there's parking at the train station. So those are all places along the road, along the way, where there will be some parking.
Right, yeah, okay, because you have to pay to park at Mount Philo too, so then you'd have to pay to use the trail if you wanted.
If you park there, unless you go early.
Right.
Most of them are allowed.
So if you parked at the town hall, you could park for free and walk to Mount Philo and come back.
Or the flea market area is, you know, eventually be connected, yeah.
You had your hand raised. Just why don't you stand up and identify yourself?
Catherine Ronaldo, and I want to return to some of the numbers because there's a lot that fly around, and I'm very unclear about what the figures are and where they're coming from. So we've got $1.5 million, we've got $2.5 million, we've got 350,000. You know, broken up into segments. The big picture is you're trying to connect the whole trail. So what is the whole cost? Do we even know that? And where is that whole cost coming from? Who's paying for it? How much is VTrans paying for it? How much are my property taxes paying for it? How much is a donation from FIT? I mean, I don't need to ask, but I'd like to have some sense of how much I'm paying for it.
I'd like to clarify my donation. There seems to be some confusion here.
I guess I don't know about your donation. Just
I
an
said,
example.
instead of paying for an engineer to come and supervise the construction, that I would be more than happy to do that. And they assign a value in the estimate to supervision. So that's how they came at the value of the donation. But what it is, it's basically the same thing that I would have done that I did on the Carpenter Road Bridge, on the Seguin Bridge, on the library roof, that I would just come by at least once a day and supervise what's going on to make sure that we're getting what we paid for. So they attach a value to that service, and instead of paying someone to do it, if I do it, then it's basically free money on the budget.
So I guess my umbrella question is, bottom line it a little bit. I feel like there's a lot of variation on the theme.
I'll try.
Thank you.
It's a long path. Some of it's flat in the woods, very simple. When we started at co-housing, the cost was, you know, we started with a local contractor. That's what we wanted to do. That's what we hoped would work in the long term. That option didn't work well because the trail didn't turn out the way we wanted it, and it wasn't built the way to withstand time. And then we went to someone who had the reputation as being the best trail builder in the state, and that trail is better. So those two parts were around $15 a lineal foot. State Park Road is $250 a lineal foot. So we were not expecting that either. The first part, the Trails Committee did most of the fundraising. A lot of us have full-time jobs. We were looking at the whole thing saying, we're not going to be able to do this for 25 years. So we went with the VTrans grant because they have the most funding by far. And it wasn't going to cost, the prices are a lot higher, but the cost to the town is not going to be that much greater. And it's going to be Burley, and the maintenance will be lower. So that's why, I mean, that's a huge difference. So we're hoping as we go from co-housing to the town that some of it will be, you know, mellower and much lower in cost. But we really don't know until we get in there. A portion of this project, almost a mile of it, is on my own property. And Mike and I have built most of it. So I don't guess that's going to cost much at all. It needs base and gravel. So every section is a little bit different, which is why we haven't come out and just said, you know, this is going to cost, yeah.
Let me just focus. The grant we're talking about tonight is from the park, Mount Philo State Park, to the Trevor Mack Trail is half mile. We have an estimate from Du Bois King to the VTrans standard, and that total is the $529,000. We have a 20% share of that. That 20% share is covered by his hourly rate now. He's volunteering and the amount that's in our current budget. So it's a standalone. When we talk about what's the total trail going to cost, you know, maybe it's 10 years away. Maybe it's 5 years away. What we're trying to do is have this link completed in the next year or two. If this grant, if we were successful, I talked to the people who, I guess I talked to regional planning, about 50% of these are approved, but we just finished a scoping study. We've got all the right things that have been done. So this is for a single link, $529,000 to the standards of VTrans. Yes, it costs more than if our local contractor did it, but our out-of-pocket doesn't really change that much because the money that's in the budget, the $55,000, we could probably get it for, and I'm only guessing, we don't have an estimate, maybe $80,000. So we're almost better off with our 20% share to get the larger professional job done. So that's all we're talking about tonight for the vote, if, you know, if we have a motion to go forward, is that piece alone. And there are no immediate plans for the next piece of this. We want to get this done. This will probably take a couple of years.
Could I just
Sure.
continue the umbrella?
Yep.
The scoping, well, I'll try and continue to clarify. The scoping study looked at 3 sections that would complete the trail from the state park to town hall. Then we have yet to look at a scoping study which would be needed to get from town hall to Charlotte Beach. There are many sections, as Margaret pointed out, that have already been worked on privately and publicly with the Trails Committee that might not need much, and there are sections that haven't been worked out at all. There are some missing trail easements that the town would either look at, or, from what I've heard in discussions, would look at other roadside options for this path that would be in the town's right of way. So, in a sense, the Town Link Trail, we're looking at the first half of it with the scoping study from Du Bois and King, and of that first half, we're looking at the first third for this grant. Then there are 2 other thirds that we would look at some point in the future to connect to Town Hall.
Let's get another voice. Kate, why don't you stand up?
Kate Lamb. First, I've had the dubious pleasure of both writing and administering one of these grants. So I want to concur with Margaret that, yes, they are more complex, yes, they are more expensive because of the standards that must be met, but they do end up being good value for a town because of the match is more significant than anything we can get anywhere else. So I do think, although this is a complex trail section, because of those standards, it could in essence be better value for us than any other method of funding it. I think also that this section is a complex section because of the wetlands, the width of the road, topography, other things. And I think this may be the section which is indeed appropriate for those greater standards and higher engineering. And speaking to the ecological impact, I think that would also be appropriate to use these higher standards. I also want to say that although I know everybody has a lot of concerns, I do think that those concerns are valid and should be aired. I think the focus of what we're doing here tonight in the agenda item is to vote to approve a letter of support, not engineer, finally, the trail in this meeting. And so I think if we look at that agenda item, will the select board submit a letter of support? I'd say, what's the downside? We are not here talking about accepting it. We're not here talking about building it. Obviously, that's the expectation. But we're here to talk about whether the board will submit a letter saying it's a good idea, it's okay to apply. I think if we go back to not 1 but 2 votes we took this spring about this, there was an incredible amount of information submitted, front porch forum, public meetings, town meeting discussion.
where a lot of this was brought up, and those votes were resoundingly in favor of this 40,000. Now, I understand that was to be put into the fund, but the implication was it was going to these projects as matches. And so I would say, yes, your concerns, the concerns we've heard are valid. There will be, and also based on my experience with these grants, believe me, this is in some ways just the beginning of the engineering questions and work. There is a lot of work still to be done on hammering out all these things. I don't think anyone's concerns will be put aside or unheard by submitting a letter saying it's okay to apply. And I think that's the agenda item. I would really urge you to submit the letter. You have some public opinion that's been shown at town meeting. You've heard voices of support. Yes, there are questions to be solved, but that is not the decision for tonight. I think there's absolutely no downside to saying, go ahead, support the, file the application, and let's take it from there.
John.
I want to just start by reinforcing what you said. This is just about should the town, should the select board sign a letter in support of this application. It's not a referendum on do we like trails, do we appreciate all the work that the trail committee has put in, do we like the idea of recreation in our town, do we like or disagree with the engineering ideas or impacts on state park or other things. It's about whether or not the representation by the select board for this application is fair, reasonable, and honest. I have concerns. I am not easy with the fact that we are obligating the town, or at least morally obligating the town, for over $100,000, of which some has already been allocated, but the majority has not. I'm uneasy that we're using the services of an individual, an elected official, as an in-kind contribution. And that really rests entirely on Fritz being, professionally qualified, willing, and able at the time the services need to be provided. And that's fine, but, life is uncertain. And the fact that he personally will be able to deliver is not guaranteed. And the responsibility is the responsibility of the town. And, if at the time somebody wants to step up and provide in-kind, save the town some money, that's great. But the application is for the town to accept the responsibility for that share. And I don't believe that that has been put to the townspeople, to the taxpayers, to say, are we happy to obligate ourselves for a further $60,000 or $50,000, whatever it works out to be that amount of the match. I'm not entirely easy that the purpose of this application is consistent with the purposes of this program. This is a transportation program for which, we're seeking money for a recreational program. This is not a transportation program. This is a recreational program. So we're adding our town's credibility and integrity to a statement that says we think this is the right, kind of transportation project for this town. We will obligate ourselves to meet the 20%. We may have a mitigation through a private contribution or not, but I think the town really ought to be able to opine on it. I think that the enthusiasm for the trail, the hard work of the Trails Committee is all commendable. I worry that we're just grabbing at this because the numbers are big and we think there's a shiny object there that if we move fast we can get. And I would just remind us that, the VTrans money comes from someplace too. It comes from us. It may come through our state funds, it may come through our federal funds. But we have a stewardship obligation to that money just as much as if it were the town's money. And if we think this is really a good investment of $500,000 of public funds, then fine. But when we sign the letter, we're saying that. And I'm not sure the townspeople have necessarily given you the mandate to make that decision at this stage.
Well, there's a couple. You want to respond, Margaret? Because
Lucy had her hand up.
Lucy, yes. Why don't you stand up? Lucy? Yeah.
The one comment I just want to respond to, I'm Lucy Gibson, I live 2 Boys and King, and we work with a lot of communities that are doing funding applications to this program. And from my perspective and seeing a lot of projects go through this process, I think this very much is consistent with the bicycle pedestrian program. Being a transportation hat doesn't mean someone's not going to use it for recreation. And the kinds of projects that have been funded are like rail trails, which might be more recreation than this one. I think the intent of the project is that it'll be a way for people to move through town, which can be for utilitarian transportation or fun. And when you think about why people drive, they're sometimes out for a joy drive and sometimes going to work. So there's not a hard line that we have to worry about being one side or the other. And I think as far as the program intends, very much.
So the
is a
application
fix.
will make it clear that this is a recreational
Well,
program.
I think it's both. It's meeting a transportation. People drive to Mount Philo State Park. Is that transportation or recreation? You know, there's not a, it's very much for different purposes, I guess is my. It's not a mountain bike trail that does a loop through the woods. That would not be a kind of trail that would be compatible with the program, if that makes sense.
Clark, you've had your hand up for a while.
I certainly share the sticker shock that a lot of you share when you hear that the $500,000 figure. And I used to feel very strongly that, you know, if something was too much money, whatever level of government paid for it, it's tax dollars. It is tax dollars. And that we ought to be cognizant of that. What we do in this town with the lowest municipal tax rate in Chittenden County, what we do in this town with the lowest municipal tax rate in Chittenden County is the Kate Lamptons, the Margaret Russells of the world, the Fritz Tegans of the world, the John Snows of this world, do a tremendous amount of volunteer work that benefits the community. And we are competing with Essex, Shelburne. We're competing with towns that have staffs of people to write these grants. When the state and the federal people say 10% of this money is for recreation or enhancement, that's done at the national level. We can ignore it. We can talk to Mike Tashka. We can talk to Peter Welch and register our opinions about whether or not it's appropriate. But when pools of money have been allocated by state and federal government to do projects, and I look at how expensive these projects are in South Burlington and Shelburne, where these kind of numbers might only be right-of-way acquisition. We have the opportunity and the foresight as a town that's relatively small for doing these things through our volunteers to apply for some of these funds, to leverage the volunteer efforts, and therefore to be able to do these things while tracts of land are large and while the opportunities exist and may be hard to come by. I used to have a real tough time swallowing this 8-foot standard and the depth. And, you know, I watched it go through my farm. The Trevor and Melissa Mack Trail goes through my farm. Well, it was my farm. It's the vineyard now. But as Kate said, you know, you take major sections of these trails and you build them to standards that stand the test of time, that don't just wash out or you sink in the mud. And State Park Road is maybe lightly traveled. I certainly sympathize with you, those of you on Mount Philo Road. People go very fast down there. I drove farm equipment for 15 years on State Park Road. And why somebody wasn't killed is beyond me, because people go up over that blind hill and down. And God save you if you're on a bicycle or a tractor, because in that dip, there's no shoulder, there's no room, there's trees. And so the opportunity to connect our most well-known feature, the most visited state park in the state of Vermont, is also the littlest and the most visited. I just think it's a unique opportunity, and I gulp with the rest of you at the $500,000 number. But I think that we're administering this town in an incredibly effective way for an incredibly low amount of money. And please read the annual reports of any other town in Chittenden County, and see what they spend on town government. Anyway, so again, I appreciate all the volunteer time that's gone into this. Fritz, don't break a leg. Because we probably would have to go back to town meeting and vote if this thing was going to go over budget. We don't have authority, we haven't granted authority to spend more than $40,000 plus the trail committee budget. And if they're going to spend more money, we really have to vote on it.
Sorry to jump in, but, you know, the Locks would be willing to do that if we are given the chance to vote on whether or not we wish to spend more money. The question is whether or not the town can obligate itself without coming for town meeting with the townspeople for authority. And that's the only reason I'm questioning it. I don't question the hard work of everybody or the desirability of a trail at some point. But to fund this one ought to require taxpayer consent.
Yes, John.
John, well, yes, rough figures, this trail is costing $1 million a mile. You need to think about that. This section.
Understand. Yes, Michael.
Mike Russell, so Mark, Melissa Trevor Mack, that cost $185,000, as I recall?
I don't remember, I didn't pay for it.
That was the number that was in my mind. So there's 3 sections of this trail, starting at co-housing all the way to State Park. 2 of them are already constructed. The section from co-housing to the underpass cost $80,000, mostly fundraised, built to a lesser standard. Melissa and Trevor Mack, I think if you check, it is about I was shocked at the time, $185,000 for that section of trail, and that was
about 3,600 feet.
something like that. Okay, and this section is going to cost $530,000. You add that all together, and you divide it by the lineal feet. It's an average price of $60 a lineal foot. So to your question, I think those are 3 very different types of sections of trail: higher standard, lower standard, so that might be a reasonable number to extrapolate over the remaining 5 miles that would be built to connect the co-housing to the beach. Now, there's more or less complicated areas through there, but that's maybe a number you could rely on. So that's all I wanted to clear up.
Lucy, what were the numbers for co-housing to Town Hall? There was 2 sections there?
So, well, I did do all the numbers. I unfortunately didn't bring them with me because I wasn't even planning on being at this meeting, and I have all the details. But I think the state provides reports. I've shared them with the Trails Committee, and anyone can find them online on what the cost of these types of projects are, and they kind of range $40 to $80 per foot for well-designed, well-constructed trails. And those are we start with those numbers and then make adjustments for the difficult spots and the easy spots and that kind of thing. So that is the range of what
And then
the other is, and I think,
the distance from co-housing to Town
and it's a
Hall.
longer distance, and so it might have been, closer to $1 million to get all the way to Town Hall.
With
And there are a couple of
VTrans
bridges in there
standards.
too. Right.
With VTrans standards.
Right, with VTrans standards. And then some of this cost is the engineering, the permitting, the construction inspection, that's all.
So really, that's
Added
the
on to it.
highest range.
Right.
And then, okay.
Yeah, and then doing this project to VTrans standards does not obligate the town in any way on what you do further going north into town. And it turns out the better approach is a lower standard with different funding. Or if VTrans becomes more flexible, there's certainly, every step has to be done with the information I think you have at that time.
And the standard is key,
For shared use. So we're designing it for biking and walking. And it will be gravel, so we don't expect road bikes to be on it. But for, kids or adults riding fatter tire bikes would be the kind of trail that would be comfortable for that. And that affects both the width and how sharp the curves we have. And then the other standard is it has to be handicapped accessible, so that it cannot have any exceptionally steep areas.
What do you mean by other standard? Did you say other standard?
Oh, well, if it was more of a recreation standard, it could be a little more curved, it wouldn't have to be handicapped, but V-Trans will not pay for a trail like that.
Okay, so it has to be.
Well, there's a difference
handicap.
So
between.
for this project, I think we've all come to the conclusion that this is the way forward. And it would be handicapped, accessible, bike friendly. So,
Yes, Margaret?
I just want to say that this is happening in communities all over the country. Budgets, the next generation wants more pedestrian bike transport. And so you will see the budget, the transportation budget is slowly increasing on the pedestrian side. Like when you take apart a project, I mean, when was the last time you took a project apart, of a road upgrade? Like some of that budget money is going to be going towards pedestrian access because that's what the next generation wants. And I think we'd be wise as a town to pay attention to that because young families are buying homes where these amenities are there.
Christina, you're next.
Christina Ford, to what John Snow's been saying, if something came up and Fritz had to move, or Fritz is incapacitated for 4 months during this project, by you guys going through with this grant, are you committing us to the $100,000 minus what Fritz is donating? But if he is not here, are we committed to still paying that amount because we now have to pay an engineer? Is that what this letter is for, that you're doing? Are you committing us to a portion of $100,000 for our portion with Fritz having $60,000 on taking care of his expertise?
As I understand, the answer is no. We are, by writing this letter, when the grant, if for some reason you win the grant, then you have to commit to it. Then the town can decide that to not take it if they choose to do so. And I would hope in that time period that there is some cost efforts made to see exactly where, if there's some savings to be had by using other contractors, or conversations with V-Trans as to if they are flexible or what alternatives might be. Because I read the document that talked about how V-Trans came up with some of their estimates, which are in line with what's in our report. And they flat out say that, this is based on 3 projects, and they're completely different projects. So the cost information is not accurate enough to apply, so they picked an average, which seems to be where ours is on the higher side of average from looking at this V-Trans document. But by approving this letter, we are not committing, as I understand it, and somebody tell me if I'm wrong, to spending the money until the grant is approved. At that point in time, when we accept the grant, that's when the commitment is made.
Heather?
I just have a question for the Trails Committee. If the grant is, if you apply and you are approved, what is your intent after the fact to help educate us on what you want to happen? I mean, public discussion, town meeting, I mean, what can we expect if we do get approved?
I mean, that's a good question. I mean, so, because this is not our first grant, it's our largest grant. So you have to put it out to bid. I'm sorry. You have, if you are approved from a grant, you have to write up the project and then you have to put it up to bid. And usually you have to have a minimum of 3 bids. And so we get written information. And I believe we have to go to the Selectboard to choose someone to construct that. So that's been the process in the past.
Is there public input along the way, or how do you foresee that happening?
I think that's really up to the town, but generally there's a lot of input from abutting landowners. There's usually a couple public meetings during the design process. They're not really required, so it would be, the town could decide they want to hold more frequent meetings. So
There were 3, John Lemanek,
Yes.
There have been a number of public meetings already, and they've all been posted. We've asked people to come. We've gotten all kinds of input for over a year. We put that together with Du Bois and King. So there's been a lot, hundreds and hundreds of hours.
I realize that, I'm just talking about if we do get approved, we have to accept or not accept. What is your thoughts on how you could find out what other people think at that point? That's all I'm asking. It sounds like you've got to think about it.
I mean, I would assume if we get this grant, we're gonna wanna go forward, and we'll come to the select board and we're like, hooray, we got the grant.
Do you have a timeline? Are you?
December is when
Yeah,
I think back by December.
by December, and then it'll probably take a couple of years, actually, to design and build. Yeah.
I mean, we have a lot of options,
Oh, I know.
special
I
meetings,
know there's concerns out
communications.
here, and I'm concerned, and I just want to make sure we don't, because we're writing a letter of intent that we do want to move forward, which of course we should. We should find out if we can even get the funds before we get all panicked. But we got to keep the process moving, and I just want to find out
Thank you.
how that's going to happen.
Peter?
Hi, Pete Demick, or as my wife would say, provocative Pete. After our trail walk, I really wasn't so much against the trail if they would get off the road. It seems like a trail in the middle of our road and cutting down. You said it was like 6 to 10 trees. I think it's 6 to 10 of every variety. There's an incredible canopy over the road, and to destroy that canopy seems actually wrong for the state of Vermont. And if you read the sub-statutes from 1904 from the state of Vermont, you find the tree warden actually has to come back to the town and ask permission to even cut one tree in the public right-of-way. So and I think when you start looking at this stuff, you can't just go along the edge of the road and chop down the entire north side of the road. And it's not just those trees he's picked, but it's the entire slant all the way down into the wetlands that those trees would have to be destroyed. Now, if the V-Trans grant will let you go off into the woods where a trail should be and get off the road, maybe it's not so objectionable. I mean, but to cut down, when you're standing up on the top of Mount Philo and you look down, you're going to see nothing on the north side of the road. And I think that's horrendous. I think to cut down all those trees so that you can have a trail is just plainly wrong, and I think you'll find it's against Vermont statutes.
Let Margaret, because it isn't. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, the tree warden's here.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I wanted to speak directly to that piece. I'm Mark Dillenbeck, I'm the tree warden. A few days ago, Wayne asked me to do a preliminary assessment of the trees that would have to be removed in order to accommodate trail along the side of the road. So initially I was concerned because any given half-mile stretch of road in Vermont could require removal of hundreds of trees in order to accommodate the kind of bike path that we're envisioning. But looking at the north side of State Park Road, if you eliminate well, first of all, there are stretches where there are no trees. And if you eliminate the trees that are diseased, damaged, malformed, or doomed, because elm trees tend to die when they get to a certain size, and we're expecting that ash trees will also die in a few years because of the emerald ash borer. So if you eliminate those trees and just look at the remaining trees that would have to be removed, there are I counted a dozen significant trees. And it would impact the way the road looks. So my recommendation as tree warden is to figure out a way to configure the trail so that it minimizes the requirement to eliminate those trees. But any stretch of trail is going to require some tree removal, so it's a balance of public good. Do we value the trees more than the trail? In this instance, my judgment as a tree warden is that the public good of the trail is greater than the public good of maintaining the dozen trees that would have to be removed to accommodate. And also you have to keep in mind too that when you remove trees, the trees that are behind those trees that are removed will be liberated and will grow and will fill up the vacant space. And there is an issue of, trees at the margin of the trail would be impacted, and so some of those would also be damaged or destroyed, yes. So it's not an insignificant thing, but it's a trade-off, and it's a judgment call. I think some people would say don't cut any trees and there should be no trail. But my position is that we shouldn't prevent the creation of a trail to save a dozen trees. And I'm hopeful that there's kind of a third way, thanks to the donation of easements by the Hinsdales and Jonathan, the other landowner. Thank you. Yeah. So I think even among those dozen of trees that I've identified, I think probably half a dozen or so of those, half of those could be conceivably preserved if we do the trail the right way.
Thank you. Someone else has spoken? Yes.
Vince Krockenberg. After what Kate said earlier, I'm still trying to figure out what the downside is of submitting this letter. I share Peter's concern. Walking along that roadway today, I think locating that trail right along the roadside would still make the walk not very pleasant. I mean, particularly when that big dump truck came down the road and we all had to squeeze off. So if we submit this, if the board submits this letter in support, that doesn't commit us to where we will build the trail, right? It only commits us that we're applying for the grant. And that whole process of determining where the trail will go, how many trees will be affected, whether the trail will be right alongside the road or in the wetlands, all of that is still open. We don't get committed to answering any of those at this point. Or am I misunderstanding?
No, there's a design portion of this $75,000 is a design portion of this grant that's in the proposed budget.
Sure, so that's going forward.
Yes.
Right.
Going forward.
So we can still discuss all of these questions about where
Yes.
that trail will be, how many trees will be affected, if this letter goes forward. If we get the grant, and between now and it's probably what, a December determination for that? That gives us 6 months to figure this out. And maybe you could even conceive of the possibility we get the grant and we turn it down. So I don't know what the downside is to this. I want to second what Kate said earlier. Let's go forward with a letter, because that's due, what, in a couple of days, I guess,
Yep.
right? Go forward with a letter and keep this process going for the next 6 months to get more certainty about the other questions about trees, location, and all that stuff.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mary.
I have 2 questions now that you just said what you said. I've heard people say, I heard Fritz say it, that if we apply for the grant and it doesn't mean that we're committed to it. If we get the grant, there's some decision that's going to be made whether we actually want it or not. What is that? Is that a select board meeting and you vote on it? Or is that something that comes back to the town and the town says, yes, we would like to go forward with this is great? I haven't really heard an answer to that.
Is there a November public election?
No.
So the next town-wide election is next March.
I'm pretty sure just with fire and rescue purchases, anything over $50,000 needs to be voted on by the town. The select board cannot approve something over $50,000 without a town vote. The in-kind piece, I would probably need to hear a legal opinion on it, because right now we're at 40
I would first of all
something.
have to contact VTrans and see if I'm legitimate. I may not be. I would also hope that, things in that process, things would be less. And if the in-kind is a percentage, as it's calculated, I believe, if for some reason the prices go down a lot, then does that mean
It caps the
It is a
in-kind.
percentage.
so then that
It's 15%.
would also be reduced, and where would that put us? I mean, my personal opinion on this, and which we will probably all get to at some point, is it's an awful lot of money for a trail. I think I've talked to a couple local contractors on prices to put in this kind of stuff, I think the prices are very high. If I was committing to approving this and spending the money tonight, I would not be prepared to do so. But in light of the fact that it's just a letter saying that we support this, there's lots of time and even discussion to have an election if we decide to put it in front of the town before we even find out if we get the grant.
I had a question to Lucy, I guess. You have a lot of experience with these grants. Who is applying? The grant application is being done by who? The town of Charlotte? The Trails Committee?
Well, it's typically the town, and it can be an organization within the town, but really it is the town overall responsibility, so I guess.
So it's really a select board grant application that the Trails Committee has prepared with hundreds of hours of work, and then the select board is adding on to that a letter of recommendation that this be supported?
So if you are successful, if the grant application is successful, then some entity has to enter an agreement with the Agency of Transportation, and that's one of the decisions that you're kind of making, are you accepting the grant or not?
Which would be a select board decision.
I don't know that they
or
would want to have that agreement with the Trails Committee. I think they want to have it with the town, but there are other nonprofits that have signed agreements and built projects. Like one example is the Friends of the Memorial Valley Rail Trail. They're building that, and it's a nonprofit, and a lot of towns are supporting it with funding. So,
And then I
I
guess,
think there could be different options of exactly who's.
and then another question on the funding. Someone had mentioned in the beginning of the meeting, I think Mr. Coyle, that it's not a straight up grant funding, it's a
Correct.
reimbursement
It's a
program.
reimbursement, right.
So really, the town would need to be spending the $529,000, of which 80% would be returned to us.
Right, so the town pays the bills and then gets reimbursed.
So that's a
And if
funding,
it costs less, then they reimburse you less, they're not.
so that's a funding mechanism. I'm not sure we've looked at how to do that within town policy.
It's the same as the scoping project right now. It's the same as a lot of grants that are done in reimbursement. Town pays 100% and then gets reimbursed 80%.
So if we're doing that, that's well over $50,000.
Right, I'm not sure the $50,000, I think that's
Is for
in
purchasing?
in the memorandum of agreement with Fire and Rescue.
Just fire and rescue.
Yeah.
We had not ever heard that before, that about the reimbursement.
Well, is that,
part.
I guess
That
my question
fairly new to us.
to Mary would be, is that something we would have to budget for? Do we have that amount
Just
available?
pull it right out of that money tree.
The reality is that that's over, a 3-year period. The first part of it is engineering and design. So that's going to take, probably in the realm of a year, and that is a portion of the budget. And then construction is as you go. So it's not one check for $529,000.
It's a cycle of, we submit a bill and what would say the lead times? Couple of weeks?
Usually a couple of weeks.
Couple of weeks reimbursement for a particular bill?
So just like the road projects?
Yes, what I was gonna say, the same
It
as the road project.
increases the budget, but the revenue side is increased as well and
yep.
doesn't affect the tax
Yep.
rate.
I can also just make a few comments on the cost. I agree they seem really high. It seems like you should be able to build a trail for a lot less money. But what we do, the cost estimate somewhat to be conservative, because if the town did, if circumstances came up that cost went up higher than what you've applied for, the state doesn't give you more money, they expect the town to come up with a shortfall. So we're aiming a little on the high side in order to get a little bit of buffer room. And it's also, they can adjust it to $2020, because that's the year that it would be likely to build. Or maybe it was 2019, that's right, they're inflated a little bit to account for that as well.
And there's a 10% contingency
Yeah,
on
that's
top of the
like
budget.
buffer, right.
Okay.
So, it does seem like a lot, and it hopefully will be less if you get your project done for less. Everyone will be happy. So, and that's kind of what we're kind of aiming for.
We ought to wrap this up. Are there any more burning questions? Mary has her second question. Yes.
So about the trees, the issue that Peter brought up about cutting the trees, the tree warden actually has to, by statute, has to hold a hearing to get approval to cut trees that aren't diseased or infested. You can't just You can't just decide to cut down a bunch of trees because they're in the way. It's by statute, it's,
That's correct, Mayor.
We understand that. Any other? Yes, you haven't talked yet. Yes, David.
Simple question, what is contingency?
It's just
What does that mean?
10%. They added, so they came up with a project cost, and they just added 10% to that for an overrun.
It's all the things you didn't think of or that might be
Like when you're
different
building
than
your
you expect.
house, what you forgot.
I have a
Go ahead.
question in the application. Maybe Lucy, you could speak to this. In section 2, under complexity, it says the section of the town link trail we are requesting funding for is a half a mile long and will be next to the road the entire way. Does that give the town the flexibility to choose that second path we talked about that is more circuitous through Kimball Brook?
I think it does, and that's a matter of, one of the things you do have are easements to go off the road, and we did talk a lot about that. The cost would probably be higher, and I do have estimates for what that cost is. So if you want the flexibility to go off the road, it might be wise to include a slightly higher cost with that.
And then you had a tertiary possibility if we could
And
get
that's actually,
another,
that one's actually the least expensive.
the
It's
least,
still a bit
so there
further.
is a much less expensive.
Because you can have a shorter boardwalk and a lower, closer to the ground.
And
boardwalk.
that could all be done after a grant is awarded, you think? Yeah.
But you'd have to apply for the amount of money. The amount of money you're applying for is what you're,
And if it was
Deciding.
twice what the town needed, what would happen? You know, if we went with the least expensive option that hasn't come to fruition yet, what happens if we have $200,000 left over? Do we,
well, I think you really have to decide fairly early on which route you're going.
in this application?
Well,
You're getting
no,
reimbursed,
wait,
so
no.
you're just not gonna be reimbursed.
My suggestion was that maybe you put in the
Maximum.
boardwalk route,
Yep.
not the most expensive one, but the lower of those costs, and then you can always do the lower cost option, bring it on the road if you need to. And that would be the more
Conservative approach.
and give you more flexibility. And you're not committing to exactly where it's going to go, but if it does cost more, that's going to be the issue you might want to avoid. And I have the estimates here that I'm happy to hand out. If-
For what's the variation
For the other boardwalk options,
within the State Park Road?
right, for just the state park.
So the base one we've been looking at is 529. And then the next one is,
Is
6.
676. Wait, I'm sorry. 529. Yeah, 676.
And
That's for the whole,
that's the most elaborate with the boardwalks.
that's the longest boardwalk option.
So if we have a motion to send in a letter of support, we, with that, send in an application for one of these options.
Right. You would want to pick
We should pick an option. Okay, we've had a lot of discussion. What is the pleasure of the board?
Turn
I
on the
no
crystal
longer-
ball and see what's going to happen.
Well, I think the most
I like the long.
crystallizing question tonight that I've heard is what is the downside to applying? And for me, I'm looking at a healthy community development process for the trails. This is the first section of what will be a few 5-7 miles of trail development that we're going to be endeavoring over the next who knows how long. When I last year looked at the great work that was done to complete co-housing to Route 7 in anticipation of the tunnel being completed, I thought it was $80,000 of grant money and $20,000 local match. So you got a $100,000 trail section, and the Trails Committee seems very happy with that construction method and quality and standard. You know, I'd personally love to see a RFP go out for that quality trail and measure that against a VTrans quality trail and see, is a $150,000 trail with unknown funding sources more attractive and a better option and a better fit for the town in that location than a $500,000 to $600,000 trail that may end up costing us less. I'd like to see that. So as far as the process goes, I kind of was hoping to see us develop a consistent policy about how to move forward with this process so that there are fewer question marks, as Heather Manning brought up, about how do we go about building out a trail system. So in the past, it's been done with incredible fundraising by the Trails Committee and with a $5,000 appropriation for maintenance and adding to in-kind matches. When we were in the budgeting season, just looking at it, it seems like that would take over 100 years at that funding. So I put forward the article for $40,000 to really give a kick start and to see how the town feels about building the trails out. And people really want to do it. How we go about doing it is what I want us to be able to focus on and come up with a plan for. So I think this is a good grant to apply for. I don't know that it's going to be the right fit for our town, but it doesn't seem like we have to decide on that now. It also sounds like we might not even get it, or there's a low likelihood of receiving it. So the downside of waiting another year, I don't see as there being very much downside to that as well. And it might not alienate a lot of people who, in general, support building out the trail system. You know, I think 2 weeks ago, we were at a place where we hadn't heard from the Conservation Commission as a whole. We hadn't heard from the tree warden. We still haven't heard from the Planning Commission. And at the site visit, it looks like there are alternatives that we could still explore for a less expensive option than the ones that were explored in the scoping study. So, you know, I think an incredible amount of work has been done, but I think one thing I'm picking up from watching this process unfold is it would be nice if the select board could create a policy for how to roll out trail development projects and what steps the town wants to see so that there's community engagement, there's kind of things people can expect from the process. And I think, would lower the anxiety levels of people at these meetings and would also increase the security that people's tax dollars are being spent in a judicious way. I don't think any decision we make tonight is going to obligate any taxpayer to any amount of money. So I just hope that people understand that too, that this is just moving forward with an option for building out the trail.
So am I hearing you say that you support the letter, but there are other alternatives in that process? So this is one option, the letter, and we file the grant application with that letter, and it's a motivator to keep us moving, and then we can look at a trail standard as a competitor to that grant. Is that what I hear you saying?
Yeah, I mean, if someone made a motion to apply to this grant next year, I would support that. I think waiting a year doesn't hurt at all in any way. If someone made a motion...
Well, you're not talking about tonight then.
Right. If someone made a motion to apply to the grant tonight, I think I could support that too, because it's not obligating the town to anything. That's where I am.
Anybody want to make a motion?
Did you make a motion yesterday or the day before?
I wasn't in town a couple days ago, so it must have been somebody else.
So I would like to know that once the letter and the grant is all written, that we all sign it, so that we all see it, word for word. And that's where we started, why this room is filled the way it is. Because we were not given all the information last year, not because of you, Margaret et al., or Lori, but the words were not correct enough in the one page that we got. We were supposed to get 6 pages of this grant. We only got 1, and there was something that was just not correct. And when I did read the rest of the grant the next day, I found a few other things. Those things have been corrected. I appreciate that. The one thing that I saw that night at that Monday night meeting, I didn't want to speak about because it talked about fatalities. I didn't want to spark anybody saying any names about anyone. So that's why I waited for the next day. And I learned a little bit more as the process went along. So I don't want you to think that I don't appreciate all that you've done. I've paid attention all the time. We're gonna put our names on that. I want it to be absolutely correct information. Thank you.
Motion from someone?
Well, I made the last one, I might as well make this one. I'll make a motion to write an approval letter for the, geez, let me read it.
So it's a letter of support.
A letter of support for the grant application for the State Park Road path.
Now, I think we have to add to that, and there's 2 budgets that we've talked about. So you need to have a budget, the 529 and the 676 are 2 budgets. So we need to, in that motion, say which particular grant application we want to submit. So the 529 is reasonably close to State Park Road, but not necessarily lined up. And the higher one is definitely through the woods there. So I think your motion ought to include which particular budget, and we have the precise price on the,
Isn't this also going to be, it sounds like it was clarified that this would be the Select Board's grant application?
yes, that didn't come out, but yes. We sign contracts that, and if the case, we may go before the town, et cetera. So back to your motion, I would recommend that you add, the one that's been recommended is the 529-280, and that does allow for off-road to an extent.
That's the one we've been talking about,
Yes.
so I would stick with that one.
Okay, so that's part of your motion?
Yes,
Okay, and then as far as the context go, Carrie's asked that all the select board members have the opportunity to sign.
Could I just say, if the application needs to be sent in by Friday, that all select board members be able to sign it by Friday?
It needs to go in Friday, so if we vote on this, if we have a positive vote, we have to sign it this next couple days, so they can get it in. Frank? Has this been seconded, or we,
No.
So we should second before.
somebody want to second the motion? You have seconded, okay. Discussion, yes.
This says, the Trails Committee submission of the V-Trans grant, so shouldn't that be the Select Board
Or Town of Charlotte.
for the town of Charlotte?
We're on the town of Charlotte stationery. I would, the select board in conjunction, can we say, in conjunction with the Charlotte Trails Committee submission? And then the select board is going to sign it.
Okay, wordsmiths at the other end of the table.
Just so
This
you
one's
know,
way over my pay grade.
there was a little bit of additional language that Laura proposed just to match the application I don't have it right now, but it basically just matches the wording of the application that they're looking for.
To
in terms
Frank's
of-
point, should we put select board, I mean, select board
It
signing
can be
it.
select board for sure, yep.
Okay. But can we give credit to the Trails Committee for?
Sure.
So name both? Okay.
Yep.
So I think we have a motion.
So discussion?
Yes, discussion.
Lucy's point, I thought, was that this, if we decide to move away from the road as a better fit option, and it's more expensive, we wouldn't, the difference in money the town would have to come up with, because it wasn't asked for in the grant application. So it's better to ask for the more expensive one in the grant, so that if we go for the more expensive bog option off the road, the money will be there. Is that acceptable for the application?
So what do you guys think?
That would increase the town.
Well, I'm kind of comfortable. We heard there's enough variability in our walk today with the Hinsdale easement of this 100 feet back, of which we can have 8 feet, and the opportunity for another easement closer to Mount Philo, that I believe we have enough flexibility with the 529 number to be generally off-road.
Just to be clear, that easement allows for it, but the budget is not to build that portion.
That's what I'm saying.
The easement allows it, but the budget is for.
The 529 would force it to be a sidewalk along State Park Road, which I'm definitely not comfortable with.
Do you agree with that?
The real place where the difference would be is where it crosses
Kimball Brook.
on a boardwalk, which is along the road. But we can get off the road for much of the length, even with this plan, and same some of the trees that we, but some of the trees right by the crossing of the brook would be the ones that would have to be removed, and the trail would be
With the 529.
with the 529.
Right.
Lucy,
But there's still flexibility. The cost isn't really affected by whether it's right near the road or off the road.
is
You
there
know,
a
other than
V-Trans board
through the
spec?
boardwalk.
Is there a V-Trans specification for a boardwalk?
There's
that
not
you've
a
seen?
V-Trans. I mean, that's getting into,
So
but there
that's
are
a,
trails that have
that's gonna be a design engineered and approved by V-Trans kind of thing.
well, they don't have a standard.
Right.
But we're meeting, ADA standards.
Right,
and the
right.
width, Right. So
Okay.
it's not something they do a whole lot of, but they have done them.
I think people would enjoy the walk through over the wetlands and through the woods, not that sidewalk straight up and down Mount Philo. It's just too drastic of a
Do you have the sheet, then
change.
it's the higher number, because I don't have
Yes.
that. If you could hand out, then we could
like
put
it.
that in the motion,
Right.
if that's what people want to do.
There's 3 copies, and one is the front one's the 529. The second page is the least expensive of the boardwalk options, which is 676.
So, I mean, is there a consensus then? We want to change the 529 to the 676, 620?
And then what would the 20% match be?
135.
It comes up to 135, it's right there. Right.
And we're gonna be short, or does the?
Well, again, if this is over a multiple year of outlays, it's not really an issue for what we have.
Plus, we can have a meeting, we could, if there's, as John Snow said, financial obligation to the town, we could call a special meeting.
Right.
We need more money.
Right.
So I guess I'm kind of agreeing with you, my 2 cents. The higher number?
I can go either way, whatever the board
That's a good
consensus.
question.
Multiple conversations.
Gavel, please.
Somebody had a question?
I just want to know, if you raise the price, does that affect the likelihood that you get a grant, or does that not make any difference?
That's a good question. I mean, so you're asking for more money, is that
It could potentially decrease the likelihood, because
because so much money they
it will
want?
be, there's only so much money, and if, they might choose a less expensive project to fill out their.
Or 2 less expensive projects
amount.
instead of our 1?
But it's probably not, if it's what you really want to do, then I don't know if I would choose the lower option for that reason alone.
Okay.
But to be honest, it would probably have a slight decrease in your probability. And it is about going to be a 50-50 shot anyway. So
We don't really
there's
know
a
what
lot of
people
communities.
want. Through the woods or straight up.
Patrice,
Most of the road would be through the woods.
Sure that it sounds like you're signing the letter of intent to support this project,
submission of a grant.
but you're not committing to accepting the grant,
Correct.
should we win it. And you're not committing to doing any of it unless there's more input from the town, and you'll determine how that's gonna happen. So that's okay.
Now, there's a 10-foot and a 20-foot elevated boardwalk.
So as we look more closely at the boardwalk option, we determined that making a bigger swoop to Jonathan's land allows the trail to go down more gradually and be lower when it crosses the wetland than keeping it within the easement. You can't get, there is, some grade difference there, so you can't get down. So it means the boardwalk would be more expensive because it's going to be on higher posts.
Right.
And it's actually a little wider because the wetland is wider there. So we would definitely recommend going with the longer option. It'll be more natural and probably more enjoyable as well.
Right.
And
And
our
then the
preliminary
reason-
talks
and the
with
reasoning-
Jonathan is, he seems okay with that kind of change. But
Might have to fix this culvert.
So we need a decision, guys.
So what's the,
I like the larger one.
The 676,
so we'll
620.
revise my motion to read for 676, 620.
Okay, is that seconded? Any further discussion? Board ready to vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Thank you all for your work and your input.
We gotta keep going.
We're behind schedule, you forgot to tell me that.
That would need to take its time.
Huh?
That would need to take its time. You can't cut that one off, cut it off early.
Thank you.
Yeah, but look,
I'm sure I got it. Sir. Library roof.
Yeah, I guess precise but not accurate. Yeah.
You want her off? You know what this really does? It's a motivation. And if it's successful, let it all come out, you know?
Still on the record.
Huh?
Don't say too much. We're still on the record.
That's fine, that's fine. Okay. Thank you. Let's go, guys. We have more to do. Thank you, Lucy, for coming. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, guys.
Back to normal. I think we're in overtime on that one.
We're up to the computer network support contract. Dean, help me with it.
Sure. We did a request for proposals. This is for primarily maintaining the network, but also providing assistance to the town with our individual computers, as well as, in some cases, there have been questions as far as the select board connecting and whatnot. So Troy Tunis has provided that service in the past. He indicated he's not going to do that anymore. We received 4 proposals. The proposal from SimQuest It's for $693 per month, and they provide the service that essentially does everything that the other services do, and they also will come on site if that's necessary. If the remote, all of them do remote maintenance at this point, but if the remote maintenance doesn't solve the issue, they'll come on site. The town of Shelburne uses SimQuest. They were in a similar situation. They had used one person, a contractor, and that contractor left, and now they had to go out and find a firm to do it. They've had similar proposals, and they went with SimQuest, and they've been very happy. So my suggestion would be to accept the SimQuest proposal for a year.
I'd like to recuse myself. I have a professional relationship with some of the bidders.
Let me ask you, so I'm looking at the summary page, has monthly fees, so you've done the math, so the $693,
Right.
the monthly fee with managed service, and you multiply that out, is that the 8,316?
Yeah.
And this
Correct.
is,
Yes.
and you've got several endorsements from Troy.
To be honest, Troy's preference, he's worked with the tech group before. He, price aside, he thought the tech group has provided good service, and I don't disagree. We have received some services from them, and they do provide good service. But their proposal for approximately the same service is $1,300 a month compared to $693 to SimQuest.
Okay.
And that, yeah.
Did you
Mary and I,
have,
that was the first thing that Mary and I noticed was the price difference, obviously.
Over Troy or
Yeah.
over?
Over everything. And we talked with Dean about it, and we talked about what we felt we were gonna get for the dollar amount. And I think the consensus really was that we did feel that SimQuest was, we need very minimal here.
Okay.
Some of these groups offer this big, huge package, and we use this much of it. we really are pretty self-sustaining, and we're not this big, huge conglomerate that, needs to have 50 computers hooked up and everything else.
So you're supportive of the SimQuest then?
Yeah, that was the general consensus.
Is there a motion to contract with SimQuest for our computer network support?
So I'll make the motion to contract with SimQuest for our network support.
Fiscal year 18 that we're in now, is that what this is for?
Right.
Effective July, well, we're in,
First.
Basically, John, you could say for fiscal year
For
18.
fiscal year 17, 18.
Yep.
is that seconded?
second?
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you. Lanes Lane, force main installation.
I can provide an update for that if you'd like.
Sure. Why don't you just give an overview of how we got here? We had a meeting with, I think most of us were there, right?
There was a meeting with the
Wastewater.
Thompson's Point Wastewater Advisory Committee.
Most of us were there.
Most of you were there.
Well, were you here? You were there?
I was here.
I was here. You were here?
Frank was there.
Maybe you weren't there.
The decision at that point was, or the item that was approved at that point was to do some evaluations of the lots that have on-site systems and see what kind of condition they're in. And that's, civil engineering is scheduled to do that on the 12th, on Wednesday. And that could inform whether there's a sense that there's some urgency in putting in the force main. I mean, the select board has approved putting in the force main, and the committee approved spending the sinking fund to put in the force main. The question I think that will come up and this was likely going to be on the agenda for July 24th, is whether camp owners would be required to hook up at this time, or whether there would be some, wait until their lease changes, or wait until their system fails. So that's, the plan was to put that on the agenda on the 24th. This was kind of just an update.
So to summarize that then, the Thompson Point Wastewater Committee authorized, out of their fund, $8,500 as a loan to put the force main in the fall, and if all these other things are, if we were assured the capacity of the Thompson's Point wastewater system could handle this, so by having the force main in, we can have lane people volunteer to put it in, they don't have to worry about their septic anymore, or at a renewal, and we have to discuss that.
Right.
So this is just informational, we're not voting now.
Correct.
And I see we have a couple lane people here, so that, the plan would be to put it in the force main. And then that would be a pro rata of that $8,500, so there's 7 or 8 lane houses, so you divide 7 into the 8.5, so that portion, when you put in the septic system, you pay prorate that to your bill. So it'd probably be about $11,000 to hook up in total, have your own system that hooks up to the force main, of which you'd prorate this against each of the homes as you install the septic system. Is that said correctly?
If and when it's decided to do so.
If, yeah, we haven't voted on it yet.
Right.
Yes.
That is decided that
Sorry.
you will put it in this fall.
Ben, could you just identify yourself for the minutes?
So again?
Could you just identify yourself?
Oh, I'm Ben Mason.
Thanks.
So we're going to, Thompson's Point wastewater voted to allow us to use the money on a temporary basis until they get paid back.
That's to get the hookups to each camp.
The
It's going to be a
8,500.
force main on the house side of the road, and then when they do the hookup, the force main will be there, can do it 1 or 2, whatever the lane lease agreement says and what they want to volunteer to do. Yes.
My only question is, they're letting you use their money. Isn't that town money? It's a town system, it's not a Thompson Point
No, I
system.
think it's waste, I think it's Thompson's, is it Thompson's Point money?
It is, they pay, the leaseholders pay into it. It's a sinking fund that's been
The
paid.
system is owned by the town,
It is, but
operated by the town.
it is.
The money that system takes in should go to the town, basically.
It's, the fund is under the town's name, but
But
the
the town's not
leaseholders
managing their own,
put
system.
the money into the fund.
The Thompson Point Wastewater Committee manages that, and there's an assessment of the Thompson's Point organization that goes into that.
I just want to be, the town owns the system, they don't own the system. So
Correct.
the town decides what they can do or not do with the system.
Right,
That's it.
okay.
I think the ordinance is written that instructs the advisory committee to make the decisions, the yearly decisions on how much it costs, how much to charge, what it costs.
But it's advisory to the select board. It is ultimately
Yeah,
the
it
town's.
is.
It's the town system, that's all I,
Right.
all I want.
Yes.
Okay.
It started out to be a private system down there, then the town took it over when they first built it. So it became the town's property.
And then they,
It's the system.
who determines the rate? I guess we verify the rate.
Well, we
Yeah.
usually, the select board usually follows the recommendations of the committee.
The committee sets the base rate, and that base rate is what we deposit into the sinking fund, so that's a set amount of money. And then there's the actual rate per gallon of usage. The billed rate. And then when the bills go out for Thompson's Point, for instance, for years, it was $500, and that was paying back the bond for the actual construction of it. And then they voted to make it $900. So there's a base rate of $900, and then there's the actual rate per gallon usage on top of that, that is due from the Thompson's Point leaseholders. And that is changed every year, based on the Thompson's Point Wastewater Committee's recommendation.
Anybody have any questions on that? So when are we,
That'll be on the agenda for the 24th.
after we get the results of what Chris Gallipo's going to
Correct.
do an assessment,
Right.
make sure there are no issues with current systems of Lanes Lane and overall capacity
Right.
of Thompson's Point. Okay.
The other issue that was raised is the town has a lot that's not leased on Lanes Lane that's been used as public access. It's fairly shallow, so it's not like a lot of boats put in there, but it's probably more for tenders or kayaks or dinghies. And at the meeting with the Thompson's Point, we meet with the Thompson's Point Leaseholders Association. They noted that there's a dock that's been put that either on the town parcel or direct or adjacent to the town parcel. And there's a trailer being stored there and an old dock being stored there on the town's parcel. So, are you Jeff?
Yes.
Jeff may have something to say about it.
The lot line, when we go from where original owners, my grandfather, Charles Wilcox and Harry McDurphy, set that and where it is, and they found it in this, on Chris's property. And going across, where I allowed this person to move his dock over on my property. And apparently, somebody told him it was illegal, and the thing was, it's at 96 feet. I have 108 feet for frontage on a lake. And we have a little discrepancy. There's, the town lot was 50, then it was 60 on another, and then now it's 66. So, yes, there is that old dock. We could get rid of that. The trailer can disappear. But we've had a dock since '64. We've the utility pole. We've always 50-50, half on my lot and half a little bit on the town. But yes, we could get rid of that excess. But there's a lot of townies that use it. And I've taken care of that for about 12 years. I've mowed it. And this year I mowed it once. I just don't want to start a problem. I just like the people there. They're very nice. I don't think I've created any problems except for that garbage that we got given all that dock from opposite side of the point. And we'll get rid of it.
I'm trying to understand the issue. Do you want it there? Do you want the dock there?
Not the used dock. We have docks in the water now. And what I believe is that they're on legal space, that my space, 108 feet, that's my frontage.
Oh, we need a site visit.
Do.
Well, because I want to see a visual.
Yep.
Thank
I have
you.
a couple pictures, but you've been there, right?
Yeah.
I just gotta show you this,
Where
just
the
for
lot lines
grids.
are would be nice.
So,
Unfortunately, at Thompson's Point, there's no surveys, so you go by the tax map. They can do what your frontage is, that's what they're taxed on, that's what the land rent base is on, is due to the tax map, so. But the last survey, there's no survey of Lanes Lane, but the last Thompson's Point survey is like 1939.
so the question
And the
is,
shoreline changes.
And Lanes Lane was actually mapped off in the 50s, they walked it off, so everybody got a 100-foot
do we
lot.
know lake frontage or anything?
It's on the tax map. It'll tell you how many feet.
So the tax map we have shows that the second dock is on the property of the town. The public.
He was here earlier today, got a copy of the tax map, I'm not sure that your assumption is correct.
Well, I'm
You
just
should
looking at
prob-
the map. You can see it
Is
visually.
that the
Both
tax map?
Yeah, both docks are right on it.
We'll pull the tax map and see what the frontage is, but that's really the only map we have of it.
No, I found it when some people were complaining.
And these are people that use the town's section.
It was just Thompson's Point people. You can see the dock to the right is on his property, and it appears the dock to the left is on the public access property.
Where?
Do you see it when I show you? So, there's two docks here. This is Lane's Lane. This is the public dock. This is his house right here. And so, there's a long dock here and a long dock here. He's renting this out to somebody to use these boats out here. So this is based on the tax map on public land. And it's, you know, sort of in a way, you know, he's making money on it. I talked to the fellow who was paying $3,000 a year to have his dock there, which is on.
Morning.
This is not a tax map, it's just Google Maps, but that's where we're talking about.
Where are the two?
Do you have this one, Dean? It has both docks?
Put ours in Memorial Day, May, the end of May, it was 20th this year. That picture was taken in 2016, and I had put one section out, and I was ready to put the rest. That first one went out last year because it was March 13th, and it was no ice, no.
Can I ask you your opinion of this map, which shows this tax map has both docks as a fairly recent satellite, and it appears that one dock is on your property and one is on, is that an accurate map?
This is
So,
where, this is right here. From this is not accurate. You see this right here?
Yeah.
This is camp, and this is where the line is.
so you're saying the tax map is not right?
No, it's not. Then from here over to here, it's not, just on this side of the dock, it's 96 feet. I have 108 feet for frontage. And yes, we need a site tech.
Well, you don't have a survey. I mean, looking at it will be fine, but
Well, you gotta know what he's
I just
talking
wanna
about,
solve
you
the
gotta
problem.
see it, and
Because it's what we
not
have.
gonna solve it right here
Between
without
Chris and
looking
I,
at.
it's the old marker that's been there for,
oh, is
since 1958, whatever.
the markers where, between your property and Chris's property?
Yeah, civil engineering found that several
Oh.
corner points, that's
Thanks.
one of them that's marked for you guys, pretty good at.
And then we could walk the shoreline.
And then you can measure off that back toward the town part, will help.
At 96.
There's a lot of marks that are hard, they're pipes and nails, and Stanley has.
Basically, when you laid out Lane's Lane, I think I know everyone still alive that was there when we were doing it. It was just with 100-foot tape, not surveyed, and trying to give everybody 100-foot of lake shore.
Well, why can't
Says
we
you got
stay
108,
with that?
And you gotta argue that.
And we've got somebody that was part of making that deal. Why can't we stay with that? And without having a site visit, I won't.
We can pay taxes based on the frontage, so if you pay taxes on 108 feet for the last 10 years, then
Basically, it was laid out as 100-foot,
But somehow he got 108.
Put it in where the run was, and with the width of the sound lot.
And so who got the,
Let's do a site visit.
I think a site visit would be good. We can look
Right.
at any natural monuments and anything down there.
Okay.
Try to figure out what's going on.
start at first light and see how the bass are hitting.
Rainfall.
Okay, sounds good.
And thanks, Jeff, for mowing it and taking care of it.
That excess dock will disappear.
Is the excess dock the second dock that I see out there?
No, it's on the land.
No, it's on land.
On the land, okay,
It's on-
got it,
It's,
got it.
we normally had on the side of the utility pole, there was so much of it that I told them it was a little bit too much because we're gonna get in trouble with that, but they left it, so now it's gonna disappear.
Okay.
And this is what happened. And I was hoping it would disappear beforehand, but it didn't.
Okay, well, thank you, we'll take a look at it.
Just give me a date, I'll be there too.
Oh, Dan will tell us.
Yeah, July 24th, you have the work session at 4 o'clock with the auditor.
There's no real rush.
I don't know if they're, okay. So it might be the August meeting. Okay.
Is that all right with you?
That's it, just, I guess, Chris should be there too.
I'll let both of you know. Let me just make sure I have.
Just on the left of yours, Chris. Is this your neighbor? to the left?
This is,
you're
Jeff
on
is
the
our
road,
immediate
yes.
neighbor towards Stanton. Toward the east.
On the left,
To
if
the
you're on the
left,
road.
yes, as you're facing the left.
You're facing the left.
And like I said, the corner point, civil engineering found in the hedge between the two houses, which is consistent with what Jeff remembers when his father laid it out.
Grandfather too, Charles.
And then Stanley will be there, he'll be able to verify that some of that, the measurements seem to fit, it's about 100, I mean, I just used 100-foot tape.
It's basically 100, of course, some of the banks.
They do vary a little because there's a curve there. And where you actually take that segment, a straight line on a curve, and some are on the tax map that Jeff had today.
Did they wait?
Some were a little more and some were a little less.
Nobody's ever argued.
Is this high water or low water?
I think it's 96, right?
Like high water.
It's 98 right now.
Well, they put the pins up higher. The pins are not on the beach, they're in trees typically, up on the bank.
They're on the banks.
But then they would go to a water level mark and run that way, or they would go right from the pin?
No, they're frontages. They're like, yeah, that's right.
And of course, some of the shoreline that nobody rip-wrapped it has changed, washed away. First couple of years I was there, I watched the bank go back about 2 foot a year. Undermine, fall in, undermine, fall in. So
The 103,
Some
.2 washed off bank away.
That was a big one.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
What's next here? Resolution regarding Lake Champlain byways.
Right.
Yeah.
if everything goes right, I'm going to sign the purchase and sales agreement on my place Friday. But there's a form I got to fill out with them, like, get on the agenda for the 24th for the surrender and rewriting of the lease.
Typically, your lawyer will contact us, we'll draw the termination of the lease, and then we draw up the new lease for the owners. If you want it there at closing, we can have it prepared for you at closing. The lawyers normally contact Mary on that, and she has everything signed up. If you
I don't
don't,
know if my lawyer's ever been down here or not, I have all the kind of time to get my lawyer called back.
and if it appears if you're doing it on Friday, there's not going to be enough time for the select board to really vote to have the termination of one and the
No,
lease of the
I
other.
want to get it on the agenda for the 24th meeting.
As Christina's saying, bring the,
Give us a call and we'll prepare the termination and we'll prepare the new lease for the new owners. So we just need to really speak with the lawyer on it so that we know who the new owners are and where they reside and when the date's going to be.
Just sitting here, done basic. We're shooting for the 28th of the closing day. That's why I want to get it over on the 24th.
That'd be perfect. That would be perfect. If you just have them contact us and we can draw everything up with the appropriate names on it.
Okay.
all right. Thanks, Stanley. Congratulations. The Champlain Byway has been in place since around 2001. 2001. Champlain Byway. The town supported it at that point with a resolution that happened to be signed by a Robert Mack.
You must have.
And so the select board's been asked to renew to provide a new resolution. There's a corridor management plan that's been updated. The plan, I think, is pretty much, I guess what it says is that it's supported by the town, or it's in accordance with the town's planning goals and objectives. I think the corridor management plan in general it supports tourism in general in the area. It's mostly for the road. They've got signs like Champlain Byway. There's some, kiosks, and they put other information stuff on the radio and online. They do support trails and whatnot. It says, that there's support of trails. So that's, I would say a side piece of it, but that's
They
part
want
of
to
it.
be able to branch off in different ways
Yeah.
from the byways into the different towns with different trails.
So it's fairly routine?
No, well,
No, I
we
mean, the
haven't-
resolution
I don't know.
isn't that different.
I don't know. I don't feel like do we know enough about this ourselves as a board? Just write it.
No. So the byway is just for, it's just roads.
Well,
Yeah,
there's
scenic
signs.
roads. You follow the signs, you stay on the most scenic roads to go through the way, so. It's not really trail map, it's.
So did you send us some of this stuff like earlier, some of the emails back in April?
I gave you copies. I mean, back in April, did I
You
send
know,
it?
like, I'm seeing that this particular one is April 18th, and
Yeah, I
like, were we
actually-
alerted to this? So I didn't quite have enough time to understand it, to be honest.
Yeah, back in April, I didn't actually know that they were asking for any kind of resolution. It wasn't until June.
22nd,
That,
or what did I see? Did I see June 22nd?
Also, is there any way that you could pull up
Yeah.
section 4.3?
yeah, oh, 4.3.
Because we have a copy of 4.4.4, but there was a recommendation to look at 4.3 also.
Yeah, that's actually in your packet, but,
The 4.3 I didn't
oh,
find.
4.3,
don't have
no, you're right.
4.3.
Yeah, that was really only regional planning,
Yeah, we have. So the only difference is that one sentence, as far as municipal, yeah, just the underlined.
So what are you saying?
So the only new addition to 4.3 is as follows. It is important to stress that the intrinsic resources of the Chittenden County corridor are managed by a variety of different entities and are not directly managed by the Byway Council. So I don't think that increases any burden on the town. Or as the CCRPC letter says, you know, we're reviewing any additional municipal obligations from this new draft, and that doesn't seem like it adds any.
So are you comfortable approving this?
I think
Motion?
I'm about to get it.
Yeah, I don't think it's any impact on the town.
Matt, here's the 4.3,
What
organization.
page is that?
Robert liked it, I liked it.
Oh, okay.
Frank was
Oh, wow.
quick on this.
I already had it downloaded, I already looked at it today. Looked at the whole thing.
I just have one
Did
other
you?
question.
I couldn't quite read it all. Well, I did most of it, but.
Whose signature is that in 2001? Just check.
I think he was using his left hand. I don't.
That's where we're at, 2001, huh?
Make a motion to approve a resolution reaffirming the town's participation in the Lake Champlain Byway on behalf of the Town of Charlotte Select Board to be signed by the chair.
Is that seconded?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion?
Yes. I would like to start by saying, I think that we should go back to where we're all signing all paperwork. I think it's very important that we see it after it's in its whole. I know it's a little bit more time. I think we need to discuss that. I think that we should all be laying our eyes on mistakes or just whatever. I don't believe it should be up to one person to sign on behalf of the board. I'd like to see all 5 of us doing it, and or 3, how's 3, maybe, majority.
I think there are some logistics with that. I mean, we have sometimes warrants sitting on the counter for more than a week that don't get signed.
Not that often.
It's just
Not that often.
Well, okay, so the warrants are kind of, we can't get 5 signatures on warrants, so, unless it's a meeting night. But my feeling on it is if it's a document and it's 5 pages, you can scan 5 pages, email it to the person, they can print it out, sign the signature page, and scan it back, and I don't see any reason why that wouldn't be considered a signed document. So when it's one document and you don't have to look at all the invoices and everything else, I don't think there should be any problem with getting 5 signatures. When it comes to having someone come in and sign a warrant, we can't get 5 signatures. We have to go with getting 3 and then we can mail checks.
Well, so 3 would be fine with me. I think there should be more than one person signing the final document that is going to be out there.
We can leave it as a majority.
Right. The 3 people.
3 out of 5.
3 out of 5, I'm fine with 3 out of 5.
Minimum of 3.
You know, I just am not that comfortable anymore.
Well, that's the way it is unless we specify otherwise, right?
Yeah, because we vote on it, so that's an oral signature. But that's not, you're not comfortable with us signing it orally.
But a lot of times we designate
No, 'cause
the
then-
chair to sign something, we just won't do that. If that's your feeling, then we can just say that it gets signed by all the select board members.
Well, it can be 3, or it can be the majority. I just think that it should, nothing should really go out with just one person's signature. That's my feeling. Just to make sure that, if he doesn't remember, or, you know, just a chair, I shouldn't use him, but any, you know, just, I feel differently than I did about it. I'd like to know, when it leaves this table, what it looks like when it leaves this. Thank you. No real offense, I just think it's
Okay, so where are we
better
on
for
this?
3.
Do you want to start that after this one?
We can, because you asked me for discussion. I mean, I wouldn't sign this anyways, so it's fine. This one. But from here, you know, from this evening's meeting, I'm not going to ever be in favor of just a chair only signing for us, for the board. Just to make that clear.
Okay, so this motion's been made. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Next one is bond documents.
So there's a motion in the town administrator report that was provided by the town attorney, which you need a law degree to make sense, I guess. It's on bottom of page 2.
Of your write-up.
Yep.
Right. Oh, so he has a motion. Somebody want to make that motion?
So I guess you were just gonna read the paragraph is what the
Right.
motion is, right? Together with this.
Just out of curiosity, that motion, does that pertain to any particular documents that are sitting in front of you?
Yeah, the document's right here, and they do require majority approval.
Majority signature?
Yep.
There
So-
we go.
So we make the motion here and then we all sign it?
Yep.
Okay.
All except for Schedule D.
Do I get all of this? Oh, these are all of the ones that need to be signed.
But not Schedule D.
That's us, right?
No, that's one for after we've received money. There are several of those that do need treasurer's certificate.
So Schedule D, I'm going to leave right here.
Okay. Yep. I'll take it.
That's the tax stuff, right?
So somebody read the motion?
Yeah. Move that the form, execution, and delivery of the resolution and certificate related to the town's $625 general obligation bond to be sold to the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank to finance the acquisition of certain municipal firefighting equipment, together with the related loan agreement, tax certificate, bond, and related certificates, assignments, and receipts, all as presented to the Select Board at this meeting, are hereby approved, subject to the insertion of dates and any ministerial changes thereto necessary to make the documents complete as may be directed by the Select Board or its designated officer.
Which says this date, should we just say July 10th, or? I change that, it says this date, make it July 10th, 2017?
Yes.
Okay. Is that seconded?
Second.
Then, okay, any discussion? All in favor? Aye? Aye?
Aye.
So that's unanimous, so then now we can sign those? Well, those are going around. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of June 22nd, as may be modified?
Oh, that sounds like a good motion.
Okay. Stefan seconded?
Second? Oh, June.
You were not here,
Correct.
so someone that was here should second it.
Second.
Okay.
That was a nice meeting. There's a lot
This is with planning and zoning.
of, yeah.
Okay, I thought this looked pretty good. Anybody, you guys all okay with it? Okay, all in favor of the motion, indicate by saying aye. Aye.
One abstain?
Is there a motion to approve the minutes of June 26, 2017, as may be amended?
I'll make the motion.
Okay. Thanks.
Second.
Two documents. Okay, anybody have any there?
One to sign, one exhibit.
Sue, you signed your name once?
Yep.
We're somewhere in the minute signing?
We're looking for anybody have any comments to June 26th? I looked through them, it was pretty straightforward. Okay, all in favor of the motion of minutes of June 26, 2017, indicate by saying aye. Aye? Opposed? No?
Can we quickly go back to this previous motion? Two of these documents to be signed by the Select Board only have one signature line. One's for the chair of the Select Board, one's for duly authorized on behalf of Town of Charlotte.
You want to authorize the
While
chair?
we're sitting right here, yes.
Yep.
In,
We could.
Authorize the chair sign.
that's a friendly amendment?
Friendly amendment,
Okay.
yes.
To do what?
That
To-
particular-
To authorize
that?
the
Okay.
chair to sign these two,
Okay.
because they're black and white, no changes. Okay.
Yep.
The loan agreement, general obligation document. And the official receipt document.
This right here.
And the treasurer's signatures are needed. Yeah.
So, is there a motion to approve the minutes of July 6, 2017? As may be amended, the attendees were Lane, Carey, and Frank.
So moved.
Okay. This was the Arthod settlement, a very short meeting.
What happened with that?
We settled.
Did we roll over like a barn cat, or did we?
It's up to the eyes of the beholder. So the treasurer
Figured it.
is
Yeah,
who?
treasurer,
Okay. Vermont Municipal Bond Bank, so,
yep, they have to sign
and
it.
then time to duly authorize from the town.
Yep.
Everybody, the minutes were seconded? Any comments? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. So it'll be three of us, yep.
Quick question, or, so the all committee meeting is scheduled for July 31st, 7 o'clock. One comment I received to add to the agenda would be discuss conflict of interest. That was from Peter Trono. Potential conflict of interest.
Is that really a good place to do that? At that
Well,
meeting?
I'm wondering if,
Kind of like
I
a
haven't
friendly
had a
meeting
discussion
and
with him,
that.
he just sent an email, I think I mean, perhaps it's just
Yeah, not at that meeting.
dealing with, or, the broader picture. I don't know.
No, that's not the
We
idea.
actually already
of,
discussed it. Fritz happened to be absent. We talked about you when you weren't here.
That's good, cool. We already voted on this, though. I brought it up, what was it, probably a year ago? Said that people had said there was a conflict of interest, and I asked the board if they thought there was any conflict of interest. And everybody said no, and I also said the same thing to the fire department board.
So Mr. Trono, I don't know if we want to get into it now, thinks there's a conflict of interest. We actually read the state statute and the select board handbook, and they have an example.
The
that
chief.
The chief.
So obviously, Peter Trono hasn't understood how the budget process works and whose responsibility is what. The chief versus a regular member is significantly different. Chief makes the rules. Everybody else just goes along with it. If I was the chief, I would say, yeah, there's probably a conflict of interest, but I'm not.
Are you a voting member of the board?
I'm a voting member of the CVFRS board because that's part of the MOA.
Right. A representative from the select board.
And I am a voting member for the decisions made on how to spend the special funds by the fire department, the CVFR, but not the rescue side. The budget's prepared by the chief and approved by the board. So the agreement says that a select board member is on the board. I don't approve or write the budget on behalf of the fire department. I do on behalf of the board as a select board person.
Okay.
So if there's a change to what was we talked about before, I'd like to hear it.
Well, there's a suggestion that in that select board handbook that if you're part of an agency that you can enhance, the potential of enhancing, it's not money in your pocket, but you'd have a bias, in your case, fire and rescue, because you're a member of the board. And is that a conflict of interest? And you just explained why you say it isn't.
Well, and that, you extend that rationale, and then nobody on the Trails Commission can vote for anything. We all use the roads, we all stand to gain by things that are done for the roads, so who votes for those?
And I've read that policy a bunch of times. My read is for financial gain.
Well, they did have an alternative, and implied that, I don't have the book in front of me.
Perception.
Well, it's an implied gain.
Appearance of
Oh,
gain.
okay.
But what monetary gain is there to even appear?
Well, no monetary gain.
That's what the conflict's about, not about decision-making capacity.
No, it had a second phase to it. It had a second phase.
Because if he's making decisions on what the budget is that they're going for, he could, because he's on the fire department, want the budget to be larger. So he makes a decision over there of what budget to present to the select board. And then as a select board member, he makes the decision over here on what budget to approve for the fire department. And that's kind of where they're getting.
We don't vote on the budget items.
What about the
as they come
special
up.
funds?
We put.
You said you helped spend that.
We put the budget on, we listen to what everybody says, and for the last 4 years, we have never voted on any budget that's been presented during budget season.
And there's no financial gain.
It's the perception, and it's not just him, because he's probably the worst example as far as trustworthiness.
Well, no, it's not about the person, but I don't even see
I think it's more for the
the financial
benefit.
gain for,
Because you have a bias towards that department, because
you
you're
find it is
there,
under
because
conflict of
you're,
interest.
you're on it. It would be like someone on the Trails Committee being on the Select Board and really encouraging to spend $500,000 on trails, it would be, it's their bias, and that's what people have, that they come to the conflict of interest factor.
So
That's why Frank said he would step down with anything, that he would recuse himself of anything that had to do with planning and zoning or whatever, I think, is what the decision was.
Every liaison is not supposed to vote when it comes to the committee to which they're liaising.
Where is it? Right there?
well, that's not true for town policy. Like, I'm, as the wildlife and park refuge structure, I'm a voting member also, and they have a budget. But there's no ability to even perceive personal gain. It's for the wildlife refuge. Yeah, I'm a member.
Is this for a municipally run fire department?
It's just, I don't even see how it as a member, you don't get more money with more budget. Like, there's no monetary gain, even if the budget goes up or if the budget goes down, because I just don't.
Well, the corollary is true too. So in preparation of the budget, if the person is encouraging them to spend less, then there's one point, the assumption is made that because you're on the fire department, you want them to spend indefinitely. It completely, the assumption completely leaves out the thought that because now I'm involved in two votes, or one partial budget vote and another complete vote, that actually the vote could be to encourage people not to spend so much money.
I think that's why the MOA was structured in a way that a select board member was over there.
But
as
this
a
says
voting
the
member.
opposite.
Was to reduce the spending of money.
Peter doesn't like that we bought a boat. That's what it boils down to. Yeah, it is.
Has anybody actually got like the legal opinion on it possibly, just to clarify it all?
You were gonna go to
Yeah,
VLCT, right?
VLCT, I have that.
I was accused of conflict of interest, I wasn't.
That's the one I was
So
looking
if you
at.
ask VLCT and they weigh in their decision, I think that kind of would basically get rid of any question that Peter might have, one way or the other. And if VLCT says that, they should in good faith
That's not
recuse,
this
then
book.
great. If
That's the
VLCT
statute,
says
or is it
they're
this book?
fine, then fine.
What
To
page is
to
that?
what vote would I recuse
Section
myself
4.
from? The select board never votes on the budgets. We vote in a ballot box like the rest of the town does.
I'm guessing.
Oh, there it is, yeah.
Do we? I mean, anytime we get a budget
No,
from
you
library,
vote-
from
you
anybody.
vote what budget you're presenting to the town. You actually cast your vote of what you're presenting to
So
the town.
I have to not vote on, so anybody, fire department can't vote to put some to the town if you're on the road, you're the road person liaison, you can't.
I think that's a legal
present-
question.
You can't present a budget for that. That would stop
I think
all
it's
this
a legal question. If
from
the
voting
lawyers-
to present a budget.
Doesn't pass my smell test, but I'm
think
interested
the
to see
lawyers
what
say no,
Let me read the- let me
VLCT.
read the pertinent sentence.
Yeah.
Conflict of interest, identifying conflict of interest. Experience has shown that a local official is likely to have 4 types of interests that may result in conflict. Direct monetary interest, indirect monetary interest, direct personal interest, and indirect personal interest. So it takes you out of the realm of just money.
Right.
Well, what are those?
Oh, then they go into the
fleshed
fire
out
chief.
as?
They talk about the fire chief that we,
Right, and that's in the indirect personal interest part.
right. They define each one.
So Weir does not have an indirect personal interest in something in the town.
Well, that's a small town like this.
Trails, senior center, library, recreation, everybody has some personal interest in that. So if you extend that logic, we can't vote on anything unless we ignore all of the committees.
Or we can't participate in anything in town while on the select board.
Yeah, but when you're acting as the liaison, you're acting as a select board member. When you're a member of the fire department, that's a different role you play. So when you're the liaison for the select board, you're representing the select board.
But
When
he's
you're
a
an actual
board
member,
He is
when
a
you're,
board member as the MOA states of the,
right, that's still select board. When he became a member of the fire crew is when his job changed over there. It was no longer select
job?
board first. But the point
Isn't it
is that
volunteer?
if you look at what other committees you guys are actually on outside of being select board liaisons, if you look at your evaluation of what your personal interests are outside of being the select board liaison, that's where people will call to question conflict of interest.
So my point exactly, that if you're on the select board, you can't volunteer for anything else. It specifically says in the back what conflicts of interest are. Well, that's in terms of elected positions.
Page 20, is it?
So I guess we want to talk.
but I agree with you.
No,
Let's
not at that meeting.
let's not make it at that meeting.
Yeah, no.
See if you get some feedback from,
The LCT. Oh, did I sign those?
these are signed. These are the warrants, guys.
I don't think I was supposed to sign this.
Any other business to be brought forward? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded. All in favor of adjourning? Okay, consider ourselves adjourned.
So VLCT